Absolutely. Now we can know what it says. Amazing. African Union Development Agency, new program for Africa's development. I hope I got it right, Seke.
Indeed.
So, Rajesh?
Yeah. 1 minute, 1 minute. Professor Lee has joined.
Hey, I told you, on time. Greetings, Keun.
Hello, Professor Lee. Hello, welcome.
Hi. Sorry for being late.
No, you're on time with 1 minute to spare. Rajesh, while we're waiting for that 1 minute, can I say hello to Helena Tapa? I haven't seen you in such a long time. I hope all's well.
Hello, how are you? I was just gonna, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, how are you?
All good, Helena. Welcome.
Good.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah?
Thank you. Good to be here.
I think we can start now.
Please. Rajesh, are you going to make these introductory comments?
No, not at all. It is your control. Yeah, please.
Well, thank you very much. So greetings, everyone that's joined us. It's really good to see such a wide array of people, and the numbers keep increasing. We're at 57 participants, and already there's 12 notes on the chat room. So that gives us a good sense we're going to have a very interesting panels this afternoon itself. Yeah. We'd like to note and say thanks very much to Rajesh and the organizers around Chris for putting together this wonderful series that at least has managed to break some of the social distancing, which should have just read as physical distancing. And this allows us to keep a sense of community amongst colleagues that we have not managed maybe to see across a year. Yeah. And it's really good that then we use the occasion also to honor Chris Freeman, who has provided us with the materials that we've been engaged with over these weeks and allowed us also to widen the way in which we think about the world, how we consider development, and very importantly, in terms of how we plan to achieve a life that's possible for all of us, but on a shared basis across the huge variety in world systems as it currently obtains. We're going to go through today 3 sub-panels. In the first sub-panel, we're going to have 3 speakers. This is a sub-panel that's devoted to Chris Freeman's thinking and its relevance for the Global South. As colleagues are aware, we have extended that also. It's the Global South and us all. Very important noting this, and in terms of the challenges as we are now experiencing, occupying both developed, less developed, and least developed countries as well. So we're extremely honored that Carlota Perez will lead that sub-theme, and also glad that Professor Alan Freeman has joined us as the speaker to follow Carlota. The third speaker in that section is Professor Judith Sutz, who's also online, and that gives us the panel then for the first sub-theme. Professor Helena Lastres has apologized and is unable to join into the call itself. Once we complete the first sub-theme, we'll then move on to policy and politics. In this session, Professor Mammo Muchie will lead the session, followed by Bitrina Diyamet, and then Professor KJ Joseph, who will be joining us a little later. Dr. Anne Kingiri has tendered her apologies. She's unable to join us as she has a death in the family, and all of us from this community have passed on our condolences to her. We'll then take a short break, and when we return from the short break, we'll move into the third sub-theme, which is devoted to the broad topic of new horizons for innovation system approaches. In this session, we're extremely glad also to welcome Professor Lena Trojer, who will lead the session, followed by Professor Marina Szapiro, who from Brazil, who will follow her. And then we have, closing the session, Professor Keun, and Professor Keun will also broaden the topic, as he's also shared with us a paper that he'll be utilizing in that session. Yeah. So that gives, I think, everyone a roadmap to what the afternoon, I would say, should look like. As you all know, as we move down a pathway, we are creating new roads as well. And as we make the roads, we may need to make some slight tweaks to accommodate. So as you find points being raised of interest, can I also encourage you to please make use of the chat function on the side, and please be encouraged to raise issues in that. We will be collating that. All of the panelists have been briefed to keep an eye open to what's being raised in the chat sessions, and that will then also come back in people's presentations. All of the presenters have been given 15 minutes to make their presentations. So in an initial round, we will take the 15 minutes and we will return across the panel to allow a 5-minute additional comment. This second bite at the issues itself is offered to all of the panelists, and should you find that the issues you've dealt with have been dealt with quite thoroughly, you're not forced to utilize the second bite itself. Yes. So I also allow this so no one feels under obligation that this is going to be chasing you. So please be encouraged then, as we've done continuously through the series itself. We want to really encourage discussion engagement, and also, ensure that our community, the integrity of our community, is maintained and also widened as we include more and more people into work around innovation systems. So that's an excellent segue in terms of us now moving to Carlota Perez's presentation. Rajesh, with your permission, would you manage the presentation aspect? I don't know if Carlota is presenting.
No, I don't think Carlota has a presentation as such. Does she?
Excellent.
If
Carlota, you could tell us.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to this group. I want to begin by congratulating Rajesh and the other organizers for celebrating Chris Freeman's centenary in this wonderfully creative and ambitious way. To tell you the truth, Chris was too modest to accept anything done in his honor. But I think there are two reasons this time why he might have accepted this series with pleasure. And the first reason is that it featured young researchers. I had the privilege of being his partner, and I learned from him that the young should always be given priority. They should always be encouraged to climb higher and always be given opportunity to shine. And this seminar did just that. The other reason for accepting, that it was centered on the developing countries. He saw them as the young countries, like the young students of the world, capable of innovating along different paths and building a new and better future. So Chris would have been happy with this meeting, with this whole series of talks. And of course, besides congratulating the organizers, I want to thank them for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about Chris, with whom I shared so many wonderful years of life and research. Our panel was given 3 questions. We were told these were the questions, but you don't have to answer them. But I decided I would like to answer them very simply, very short, very briefly, but answering because they are quite important in Chris's thinking. So the first question was, did Chris believe in long waves? The other question, what did he really think of Schumpeter? And the third, what role did he give to science and technology policy in the developing world? Let's begin with, did he believe in long waves? Yes, Chris believed in long waves, but not as upswings and downswings in GDP or any other macroeconomic variable. In general, what he felt was that such macro data concealed much more than they revealed. Often, what's going on?
That person, what is his name? Just find out his name.
So that macro data concealed much more than they revealed. Often they are the sum of 2 opposing trends. So what he thought is that we had to learn what was behind the data. What are the underlying facts? But mostly he thought that the turbulence of the market economy, all the cycles and all the collapses and all these things, and the process of growth itself were not isolated from technology. That technology was at the core of these phenomena. So rather than long waves, he saw the unfolding of successive technological revolutions involving a major transformation in the economy and society, of course, as well as in politics and culture. He developed towards the end of his life this idea that society was made of 5 spheres, and that whenever there was a mismatch in one, whenever there was a change in one, this would create a mismatch with the others because they normally are working together. And in a sense, this was the idea, that you would have technology, the economy, society, politics, culture, and that if something changed in technology, that would force politics and culture and society to also change. So this sort of complex process is what he had in mind. So for him, the so-called long waves were a much wider and deeper transformation than can be seen from the economic data alone. And that is why he embraced evolutionary economics and the notion of appreciative theorizing, thanks to Nelson and Winter. Nelson is with us today. So Chris understood that looking at the measurable quantities alone was not enough, and that the qualitative facts were essential for a meaningful understanding. In that he shared with evolutionary economics. So if he didn't like the upswing, downswing idea, what did he think about Schumpeter? That was the second question. It might surprise you to know that Chris thought Schumpeter had no idea about technology. He did not understand technology at all. He was focused on the relationship between innovation as entrepreneurship and its impact on the economy. In fact, in his mammoth book, Business Cycles, Schumpeter identified which technology led each of the kitchen short cycles, which groups of technologies led to a jugular medium cycle, which ones were a major cluster that led to each Kondratiev wave. So he really worried about technology, but about the actual industries, about the innovation, not about how it came about. So he actually took technology for granted. He saw it as manna from heaven. It was brought to the economy by entrepreneurs, but nobody has any idea how it got to the entrepreneurs. So what he missed were two major actors and components of what was behind the innovator: research and government policy. Two huge elements that were absent from Schumpeter. Research he never really mentioned, and government policy he thought could only come in if it was really urgent in very, very serious situations. Otherwise, he figured the market would do it all. So yes, Chris accepted being a neo-Schumpeterian. But what that prefix neo meant was nothing less than the development of science and policy in order to shape the direction of the economy and society. So a big, big meaning in that neo. But of course, he did definitely accept that innovation was what brought growth in the economy, and it was what brought change in the economy. It was the driver of the economy. So the third question: what role did he see for science and technology policy in the developing world? I have already told you how important Chris thought the developing world was and how much hope he placed in its capacity to advance in new, perhaps better directions. He shared with Luxuti and me the notion of leapfrogging as a possibility, especially because the technological revolution can be seen afresh, while the more advanced world is strongly wedded to the old technologies and trapped in them. In fact, he saw the leaps in development made by South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore, the four Asian tigers, as cases of such processes of, they were really fast advance to the new in those cases. He thought that science and technology had played a crucial role in them, as Robert Wade, Alice Amsden, and others have shown us. And although Japan cannot be seen as a developing country, it can certainly be seen as one that made a rapid leap to the front ranks from way behind. Chris's book, Technology Policy and Economic Performance, uses the lessons from Japan to argue the case for intense efforts in science and technology policy. And the same can be said for his view of China. In fact, Chris predicted the rise of China to the front ranks years before the turn of the century, way before anybody really saw that as a probability. I would like to close this brief initial presentation by pointing out four central features of Chris's approach to research and its goals, seeing it more in his humanistic way of looking at his work. First of all, he gave great importance to the search for truth. He was really willing to even give up something that he believed in very strongly, because very easily, if he had enough evidence, even though he was a strong thinker, but he thought that truth was crucial. Another thing that was crucial for him, obviously, was social justice. And practically everything he did was meant to move towards the possibility of helping greater social justice. The other thing, of course, was that science and technology were essential tools for both those goals, the truth and social justice. And finally, a fourth central feature, the importance of hope. Hope was for Chris a very important aspect of what was to be found by looking at what could happen into the future with science, technology, and all the policy or whatever governments could do. So going through each of these ideas, am I okay? Something is happening? No? Okay, so Chris strongly believed that there was one single truth, and that science was about finding it. He felt that truth was the strongest weapon against authoritarianism and the strongest call for action. It's really interesting that at the time when I first met him in the 80s, I was very much into the idea of several truths, depending on how you looked at it, you know, Rashomon and these things, and that in fact, this one single truth was a bit narrow. So we had a lot of fights about it. I remember once on a holiday with Ben Dokke, we spent hours discussing this thing. Well, I have been convinced. After the experience with Trump and fake news, I absolutely agree with Chris. There is only one truth. And he really felt strongly about it. Social justice. Of course, his work was strongly aimed at fighting for social justice. So that meant that the role of policy was always a central topic, both for understanding how it worked, how policy worked, and for helping shape it towards benefiting the majorities. Whatever could be done to contribute to better policies for social justice, Chris was willing to do. And if you remember, well, you cannot remember, most of you were not alive, a few of us were, in the 1970s when the Limits to Growth report appeared, Chris came forth, made a whole team, created a whole group for studying this Limits to Growth thing, because he was convinced that we could not limit growth because there were too many people that were suffering from poverty in the world. So what we needed to do was to use science and technology to change the nature of growth, not the rhythm of growth. We had to change the nature, and we had to change the way wealth was distributed. And we are facing the same problem now. Some people proposing degrowth, and Chris would have also said, let's change the nature of growth, not the rhythm of growth. We need the whole world to come up to good living standards, and we cannot do that without growth. So in that effort, of course, he saw direct and indirect policies for science and technology as an essential part of aiming towards that social justice. And it's not by chance that he named SPRU Science Policy Research Unit. He didn't say Science Research Unit, he said Science Policy Research Unit. And hope. What was hope for Chris? It was the force that led the fight for a better world. Giving substance to hope by providing knowledge about how to achieve social justice and progress was one of his central goals in life. And that is why Chris's work is seen by so many of us as inspiring. That was indeed his main goal, using knowledge to inspire us to action. And that will be my introduction, and maybe we will have some discussions later. I was actually told that I could only use 10 of my 15 minutes. I think maybe that's what I did. Did I use more?
It's 15, but it's not a problem at all.
Oh,
but
God.
it was wonderful,
Thank
wonderful
God.
sharing. So please don't be. I think we all welcome the words, and especially, as you pointed out, all of the lessons that you've shared with us and even numbered, Carlota, are so important. And hopefully, as we move through, and it's a brilliant segue to introduce Alan, who will follow you. As you all know, and as we have been confronted by, we started our conversation about the weather. Yeah. And maybe it's a question of changing nature as much as nature is going to be changing us as well, should we choose not to. And so there's these relentless forces at play as well. And I would like us to shift to Alan. And Alan, just giving you a heads up in terms of you following now, I've also been asked, can I please encourage when colleagues join, and those that have joined just now, kindly ensure that you join marking your mute button. In other words, muting your mic. it will help and also not disturb presenters as they are speaking. Yeah, we don't have a hassle with you showing your video, but we encourage you to just be a little quieter. Yes, it gives us a chance to listen to the words as shared by Carlota. Thank you very much, Carlota. Alan, are you good to pick up now? And Alan?
I think Nasir Siraj specifically needs to mute. He keeps popping up. Perhaps somebody can mute him. And Rasigan, I think it's a wonderful injunction to tell people they must mute after they have joined. But of course, you're addressing the wrong audience because they won't hear you at the time. So maybe the organizers could pay attention to new entrants and just, watch, because you do have the power to mute people as they enter. You have those dictatorial powers that we were discussing earlier. So I'm going to, first of all, in the chat, share with you a URL. And this is the URL of the Christopher Freeman's Trust website, that is established, where we will shortly, thanks to Carlota's wonderful work, be able to give you links to nearly all Chris's works. I say nearly all, it's because we're in the process of producing a reader, The Essential Chris Freeman, with introductions by many people who have taken part in these events, and a foreword by Nick Stern, which I think will make it something that's going to be very attractive. We're also in a position to negotiate with the publishers, and we're keeping our fingers crossed, that this will be open access, but also available in print. To do that, we're going to raise money. And I'm therefore going to issue an unusual appeal, which is, don't give us money yet. Give us money in July. The reason for that is we're in the process of converting the trust into a charity, which means we don't have to give the British government 30% of whatever it is you give us as tax, which is something I think Chris would probably not have wanted to do, particularly given the composition of the present government. So what I will ask is for you to keep your eyes on this site, watch out for the events that are coming up with the 100th anniversary of Chris's birth at the University of Sussex particularly, and be prepared to give us money when the time is right, but also help. If anybody who wishes to help, particularly people with fundraising experience, I have none at all, would, one thing I didn't get passed down to me from Chris was the ability to mobilize resources. Please get in contact and say I'd like to help. So that's my preliminary. Now, I'm in a very unusual position because, of course, I had a good front ring seat as Chris's thought evolved. I mean, I've known him longer than any of you. And I was with him when he passed away. So from birth to death, I have known him. And I never expected to become an economist. The history is very strange, but I did become one in later life. And the discussions that I had with Chris from my earliest days were of enormous importance and relevance. So what I'm going to try and do is share some of the insights that I think I received from those childhood discussions. Now, to do that, I'm going to try and share my screen if I can, because I have a couple of photographs that I think are very welcome and I hope also instructive. So I wonder now, can you see this gathering at Sussex in 2005? Now, you'll see a number of people you may recognize there, but one of them here, Jeff Oldham, was, I think, one of Chris's greatest associates. I had the privilege of spending much time with Jeff after and before Chris passed away. And I think that between the two of them, their project, which gave rise, you must recall, to what became known as the Sussex Manifesto for Science, Policy and Growth, owed itself to that association. Now, Jeff was a China scholar. He actually came into what he was doing through his studies of China. He was one of the earliest English people to actually go and learn Chinese. And I think that that was also part of the influence on Chris and part of, so Chris shared from the earliest days of Sprue a desire to see that Sprue would connect up with policies that would benefit what we now call the Global South. And the influence of Jeff, who I think must also commemorate, was very important in that. Now, the next thing I want to do, and I'll now switch to a picture of Chris himself, if it will let me. Yes, here we are. I think I'll just keep that on the screen while you're watching, because I think it's a rather nice picture. It shows Chris in classic study mode in Wickford, Essex, where I grew up with him. We moved there in 2011. And then he moved to Sussex after this. Chris was part of the circles of anti-fascist left-wingers that were formed by the experience of Hitler. And I think that one cannot understand what Chris was if you don't grasp this. And something I hope to share with people eventually is the passports that Chris had, which we came into our possession when he passed away, which shows that at the age of 15, he traveled across Nazi Germany to Russia. At the age of 15 by train, and you can see all the stamps on as this proceeds. He formed his consciousness through being an active member of the Communist Party at that time. And I think that although he left the Communist Party in 1957, and I can see the picture of Karl Marx in Rasigan's background, he never parted company with the thought of Karl Marx. And I think one of the things he got from Marx was this notion of science as an immensely progressive force. So as part of that circle of left-wingers that found itself hurled into the war with Hitler, and also the intellectual circles at Cambridge, where he was before he went and joined the front in 1944, there was a tremendous intellectual ferment. And I think the history of that, the only book I know that has ever attempted even to deal with this, is a very little known work by a man called Gary Werski called The Invisible College. And it connects together the circle of scientists of the time, who of course saw science as a means of fighting Hitler. If you think of all the innovations that the British are supposed to have made, radar, rockets, everything like that, you'll find that about 90% of them came from East European emigres who fled to Britain as refugees and were part of that circle. One of these, by an extraordinary twist of fate we came across recently, was Karl Polanyi's daughter, Carrie Polanyi, who is still with us. She lives in Toronto. And Radhika, my wife, discovered this because she was doing a work on Karl Polanyi with Carrie, mentioned my name, and Carrie said, oh, I met my husband at Chris and Peggotty Freeman's house in Cambridge in 1942. So the extraordinary richness of those connections is something that we must all bear in mind. Now, I think that at this point, I'll try and show in my video screen. I think it's probably inverted because the mirror imaging of the camera has turned it around, but it's a book of essays on J.D. Bernal's 1939 social function of science. And J.D. Bernal had an enormous influence on Chris. The belief of science was very much shaped by J.D. Bernal. And by the way, I should say one of the things we have done is taken from Chris's collections of books, most of the works which I think were seminal to his influence, and I have them in my library. I draw on them regularly. And eventually I hope that we can donate these to Sussex and make sure that that is accessible so that people can look at the influences on Chris Freeman's life. Now, from those circles, he and his communism, I think he inherited an enormous respect, an enormous allegiance to the countries of the Global South. And early in my life, we were in Chiswick, where we met Nick Stern, Bert Stern, and I shared a flat. We shared a house with a man called Ralph Russell. Now, again, this is a photograph, so it's not so bad, but this is a picture of Ralph Russell. Ralph Russell was an Urdu scholar. He became a scholar of Urdu when he went and fought with the British Army in India, and he stayed in India, and he acquired a great love of Urdu poetry and has written 4 or 5 works on Urdu. He used to be affectionately called Georgie, after one of the East European communists of the 1940s, because he had that sort of look about him. But he was part of that circle too. So from the earliest days, Chris was connected to India via his deep friendship with Ralph Russell. And the last thing I want to say, which is in this respect quite relevant, is that I don't know if any people know this, and I don't know if one is even supposed to say it, but Chris was offered the commander of the British Empire. He turned it down because he said, I will never accept any honor that has the word empire in it. So there was a deep anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism in Chris's thinking from the outset, which also guided him. I want to say now a little bit, which I hope will be useful, particularly to younger scholars, about what I learned about what I think Chris's method was. I've already explained that he went to Russia at the age of 15, and his method was essentially, if you want to find out what's happening, go and see it. He had to go and look for himself. And we know that when he went, he had a number of critical thoughts about Russia. We know this because we have in our possession a letter from Sidney Webb replying to a set of searching questions, which 16-year-old Chris had obviously asked him, because the Webbs had just come out with a fulsome approval of Soviet Russia under
Hello, Alan? Hello, Professor Alan?
Listening to him. We're losing him.
Sorry, Alan, if you could hear us, could you please pause? We seem to have lost your sound. Please just check your connection.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can.
How long?
Thanks.
How long have I been absent?
Oh, just a minute or two.
Just a minute or two. Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't rehearse what I just said. I'm looking at this method of going to sea, and his method of studying the Japanese car industry was exactly the same. He went there, and one of the stories that he told me, which I think is absolutely wonderful, is he went and visited what was, obviously the precursor of Toyota, the machine that changed the world and so on. And he went round and saw their spanking new assembly line, and there was a shed at the back. And he asked them, what is in this shed at the back? And they said, oh, we'll show you. And there was an ancient Birmingham style assembly line. And he said, what's that for? He said, well, we went to Birmingham, we studied the factory, we came back to Japan, and we rebuilt the factory exactly as we had seen it in Birmingham. And then we worked out what was wrong with it, and then we built our own factory. And this was such a marvelous way of thinking about innovation that I think it's well worth sharing with you. A third point about this method of going to sea is, I remember from the earliest days of talking about economics, he was very insistent on that a big breach had opened in economics with the Methodenstreit. The Methodenstreit was a 19th century fight between German economists, and Chris was very influenced by German writing. You have to remember that at the time when he was in the Communist Party, German communism was the world center of communism, not Russian communism. Most of the proceedings of the Comintern were in German. He learned German himself, he knew German. His father, Arnold, a Victorian eccentric and a theosophist, actually was renowned for his studies of Rudolf Steiner, and I had many discussions between the two of them about the nature of good and evil, and the attainment of truth through contemplation or through observation and such things. They were both very fond of owls, which is very strange because I understand from Radhika that in India, Ulu, owl is a bit of an abusive term, but in Western society, an owl is a sign of wisdom. It's Minerva and all the rest of it, and I used to have, the owl of Minerva flows at night regularly quoted to me by my father. Nature, my friend, is green, but truth is gray, and so on. But this method, the key thing about the Methodenstreit, it was when the mathematical methods of economics were imposed on economics, whereas the people who lost were the scholars of history. And Chris was a scholar of history, and he thought history was very informative informing economic judgment, which is where, of course, the interest in trends comes from, and the surges and all the rest of it. It's actually what's going on, in my opinion, is that Chris is insisting that history must be a part of the way that one studies economics. And I think that also is very important, which means it's interdisciplinary. It's in my opinion, a mistake to think of Freeman as Chris as an economist. I think he was actually an interdisciplinary social scientist. This would be a much better description of what he was. So coming towards the end of this, I just want to point out a couple of things about the way that Chris encountered truth. Now, I was a bit taken aback by what Carlota said. This was not the Chris that I encountered. I think this is because of the way he treated his children, which is, we could go to him and we should say the most absurd things you could imagine and say, you know, and he would say, well, if that's what you want to think, that's what you should think. Of course, I now realize it doesn't necessarily mean he believed it. It simply meant he was not going to impose his views on his children. And I think also that was the way he took economics in, that I think Sprue was immensely pluralist. And I think that Chris regarded pluralism as an essential element of economics and how it should be conducted, something I have been fighting for very hard. I'm actually the honorary life president of the Association for Heterodox Economics in the UK. I'm currently editing a volume of joint Chinese and European writings on the reform of the economics curriculum, which I think that scholars from India would be very welcome to join. If anybody's interested, please do write to me. But in 1992, he signed in the AEA, I think it was in the AEA, a declaration in favor of pluralism. It was actually led by Jeff Hodgson, but people like Samuelson. There were about 7 or 8 Nobel laureates signed it and so on. By the way, I hate the word Nobel laureate because, as you all know, Alfred Nobel did not designate any prize for economists. That was funded by the Swedish Reichsbank, and now they pretend that this is, you know, an honor equal that the founder of dynamite would have recognized. Well, he might have recognized their explosive capacities. I'm not sure if he would recognize their abilities. But that pluralism informed him. So I think that when we look at the way that he dealt with Schumpeter, and this is what I want to sort of finish on, it is, as Carlota absolutely says, a mistake to think that he believed in what Schumpeter was saying. But he had this immense capacity to take from sources, anybody, ideas that could be fruitful and useful. And I think this immense respect for wisdom, even when he didn't agree with what was being said, is an essential part of the way that one has to understand my father's work. So I'm going to close the share and thank you for listening to me, and the opportunity to speak, echo Carlota's words in great praise of the organizers, and urge you to continue.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Alan. You know, also, if you don't mind throwing Nobel back at you, also blowing up a lot of things in your presentation as well. This was phenomenal. Thank you so much for bringing us into that level of intimacy. I'm sure we all gain from it as well. But the wonderful embrace around pluralism is something that's still a battle. This is not something won. And as you know, through the association, I'm a member of your association as well. And it's a battle that we are still fighting. So to that extent, we must draw on these sources. Also wonderful to hear of the trust, and we look forward to supporting it as we get. We'll keep our savings towards that. That at least gives us some opportunity under these COVID times, yes? So I think that's also a good segue to cross over to Professor Judith Sutz. Judith, I hope you are okay. Is it possible for you to click on your video and start presenting? Judith? Judith, the famous thing.
She has no sound.
Yes, I was going to just remind her, Carlota. I hate saying this, Judith. Please unmute yourself. If we were together physically, okay. I need not say that.
Okay. Could I please share my screen? Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, you can. You can, Professor. Please share.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So let me just put my screen here and okay. Sorry, I am so okay. Well, I would like to say that, of course, I have much less acquaintance with Chris Freeman, but I have some, and I can say that I share the starting of love between Chris and Carlota in Venezuela when I were exilated there. And the question I take is what kind of science, technology, and innovation policy can make a difference for countries in the global south? That it's not exactly the same. But before that, let me share with you, stepping on pluralism, like Alan just said, a wonderful small quotation from Bernal and the Social Function of Science, wrote by Chris Freeman, in which he discussed and he is against some of the very, I would say, narrow maxims of Bernal. And he said, a merging of contingent anarchy was absolutely essential to avoid the abuse of such organization, and that pluralistic political and social arrangement which deliberately tolerate organized criticism and opposition and the expression of alternative approaches were not evidence of irrational waste, but essential features of a civilized community and of an efficient system of developing and testing new ideas. I think that this is simply a manifesto on pluralism, on democracy, on tolerance, and because all of that, on future. Following Freeman, first of all, context matters. It was so with Eastern Germany versus UK. It is now with countries in the global south versus highly industrialized countries. Let me just tell you that many years before the National System of Innovation was presented, an Argentinian, two Argentinians, Sabato and Botana, presented the famous, for us Latin Americans, triangle. You see, the triangle simply relates government, production, and academy. And they posit three types of interrelationship, and in the words of Sabato, interrelationships makes development. And you have the intrarelation within each vertex, the interrelation between the vertex. So far, so good. But now comes the very new in terms of National System of Innovation, the extra relation, something that the National Innovation System has not stressed sufficiently. Because what happened, in fact, is this. Imagine Liszt in a weak Germany related with a very powerful England. You have this sort of gravitational attraction that is also what happened in developing countries in the three spheres. In government, because we have multinational, like the World Trade Organization, that doesn't allow us to do absolutely almost anything, not to talk about intellectual property rights. When you go to academy, you have an agenda that is really biased towards the Northern agenda by the vehicle of reviews and so on. And in production, it is the same. So, given that science, technology, and innovation policies to counter this gravitational attraction needs to foster local participation in any way, even if it is not so economically sound. I always remember something that Alice Amsden wrote about Korea, and he said, the motto in every industry, from shipbuilding to automotive, every industry, let's do it ourselves, even if it is economically not sounded, because it is the only way to reap the price of self-confidence. And this is really very important. Following Freeman, of course, learning is key. But to learn, you need opportunities to learn, and this cannot be given for granted. A national system of innovation, when you look at from the South, put this issue at central stage, but it is not so present in the received conceptualization. Again, context matter. You cannot give for granted what you have there in the highly industrialized countries, where learning and applying what you have learned in creative ways to solve problems is a given. It is not a given for us. So I would like to propose you an exercise. Make a map that in one axis, in the horizontal, you put capability to learn, and in the other, you put opportunities to apply creatively the acquired knowledge in solving problems. You choose the indicators. You choose it. You can, for instance, choose capabilities to learn as the cohort of age that go into higher education. You can put opportunities to apply creatively the acquired knowledge in solving problems, like how many, what is the proportion of researchers that work in business firms. I used to use for this exercise R&D over GDP that is not good, but it is available for all countries. And then you have the result. You have a cluster of highly industrialized countries, and you have a cluster of the global South. And it is exactly that way. You go and look into indicators. You can go to UNESCO, you can go whatever you want, do this exercise. And what happened is that you can just put a red line. It is the learning divide. Overcoming the learning divide is the most important feature of a science, technology, and innovation policy to make a difference in the global South. And you know, it is possible. In 1975, South Korea was in the, was like, let's say, Brazil, Argentina. In 1985, it was a little bit better. In 1995 and in 2005, crosses the learning divide. And today, it's perhaps one of the countries that is higher. So the question is that the way of crossing the learning divide is not by having more and more students in higher education. You need to find creative jobs for them. And you can give that for granted in some places in the world, but you cannot give that for granted in the global South. So building opportunities for the people to apply their creativity, this is a huge challenge for science technology policy to really make a difference in the global South. And now, my last slide. It's based on humor. I don't know if many of you, of course, because there are a lot of Latin Americans here, know Kino and his wonderful team of children led by Mafalda. And I would like to end, following Freeman, with believe in yourself. And then Mafalda is asking his good friend Liberty, but Liberty, you are putting the world upside down. And Liberty answered, This story that the Northern Hemisphere is above is a psychological trick invented by those that believe that they are above, so we that believe that we are below continue to believe that we are below. And the bad news are that if we continue to believe that we are below, we will continue to be below. So, so do not believe that you are below. We are not below. So believe in yourself. I would say that I learned that from Freeman. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judith. That was wonderful. Yeah. I'm sorry, we may have missed your slides, Judith, but we didn't want to stop you from speaking as you moved ahead. Oh. Yeah, but don't worry. This is part of the world that we really are occupying now. And it was wonderful to see you in action, and the points you presented were really so important. I think we would have been distracted with the technology. So it's really good, Judith. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
No worry. But I was hoping we could see the Matilda slide at the end. But nonetheless, I think if you share it back to Rajesh, you'll also share it across.
Okay, I will send it to him. Okay, yeah, I will send it to him.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Judith. That was really wonderful. Yeah. And as we pull across from the section itself, you know, the colleagues have shared with us how important history is, how important context is. And I think as we just heard from Judith as well, the absolutely critical importance of actually utilizing the information that we gather to improve the systems that surround us. And that's why I think it's so critical that the questions of employment, unemployment, etc., these are not issues that are trivial and can be excluded from the agenda. And you know, as I'm sure colleagues are well aware of, the idea that the technology itself, in and of itself, does no harm relative to the situation that many countries find themselves in, needs some engagement as well. I also found it absolutely wonderful the way in which you described, Judith, the idea that it may not be economical, but whose measurement is the economical bar set at? And we know it's not true costs, but it's really about the return of profits. So to that extent, I think our metrics should include and has to include, yeah. It's from Uruguay that we learned how to turn the map around. So I think it's also important, as you well know, that as we turn that map around, we also then shift pace a little bit and move into the second sub-theme and to lead us. And I think it's a good segue. Your colleague as well, Judith, and a part of our family, Professor Mammo Muchie, will get to do his 10-minute presentation. Greetings, Mammo. Greetings again.
Yeah, greetings. Yeah.
Can we hear you? Excellent.
Yes, thank you very much. You can hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. So we were asked to speak on policy and politics. So innovation to change policy, innovation to change politics. So I just want to say a little bit about Chris. I was his PhD student. I did a DPhil with him. And I was a bit crazy the way I was doing my PhD. And he was very kind, to be honest with you. I'll never forget. Because I remember the last 3 months when I was trying to finish my PhD, I was a bit not normal. So he used to come from Sussex, from Brighton and to East London to me. And he used to make me tea, coffee, and things like that. I've never seen a love like that, to be honest with you. So Chris is, he always has a special, residence in my heart because of what he did to me. The other important thing is about on the global south, for Africa also he had a very good idea. He used to say to me, he used to say two things. One, Mammo, on the football, I think Africans are going to make it. They will compete better when they play, he said. The other one he used to tell me was, don't worry about the Africa the imperialists builders rejected. will be the cornerstone of the arch. In fact, when we wrote a book on putting Africa first and making a he did the foreword, and he even did that quotation in that book. So he has been always very, very encouraging, stimulating, and inspiring to us. So I really learned a lot. In fact, I'm trying to imitate him to try to support my students here in South Africa, and I think they seem to send me nice messages, and I think I should give all that whatever positive message I get, I should give it to Chris. Whatever negative points I get, I give it to Mammo. Anyway, that's aside. But just to come to the critical points that you raised, I'm actually saying that, for example, on the Africa context, Africans do not still own Africa. They need to innovate, to learn, to own Africa. They need to unlearn, to remain dependent on aid, loan, and debt. If that is, I think, the Chris Freeman vision and idea that I mean, now nicely, Carlota also explained it, Alan did it, all the things you have described. Actually, for the African context too, for what we are now having, I think his ideas would be very, very good. And the interesting question now is, how do we develop the innovation system? How do we create an integrated, smart, innovative Africa where the well-being of the people in Africa matters more than anything else, and the well-being of the nature well-being and the people well-being? How do we bring that about? And if we are doing it, how do we also come back to the innovation arena and see if we could reconstruct, redevelop, rethink, re-engineer, redesign the entire way by which we've been thinking about innovation? So my suggestion to all of you, it might be a bit provocative to all of you, is that we cannot go through what Schumpeter said, creative destruction. We should create what I call creative construction. What I mean by that is, I would like sociological gain as well as economic gain, not sociological loss and economic gain. We shouldn't have loss and waste. We should save and preserve and gain. How do we bring that kind of thinking, that kind of model, that kind of policy, and think and intellectual paradigm that allows us to actually rethink the entire way by which we have been thinking? I don't think we should go to all the kind of describing what is going on now about how the world is functioning or dysfunctioning. We should be thinking in terms of how do we create a vision where, instead of relying on military, on killing and this kind of thing, and instead of making money at the expense of losing people, how do we come to a situation where this humanity, that relationship, actually can be an achievement? I'm not saying we should be idealistic, but we should understand what exactly is going on now. But we should have a vision, a mission and vision, where we say the world must change. At the moment, we're in a very difficult situation. We have coronavirus, we have climate change, we have a global demographic explosion, and we have the capitalist economic logic, which is still very, very not good. No, to be honest with you, I was also a student. I was a radical in my life, but I think the thinking we have, whatever we say, whatever we suggest, the capitalist logic values economics, values market, values commerce, commercial gain as number one. But that has to change. If we are thinking of changing it, we need to also change the innovation system thinking. We can't go on in the old innovation pattern, national innovation system, regional innovation system, sectoral innovation system. I'm sincerely saying that we should move into a new world. Albert Einstein said there are two infinites in the world. Infinite. One says the universe, the other is human stupidity. I think the human stupidity is now the reason why we have coronavirus, why we are having climate change, why we are having demographic explosion, and we are challenging the world. So since we are challenging it, Albert Einstein said he's not sure about the infinity of the universe, but he's very, very sure that human stupidity is, and I say the greatest human stupidity is politics. In America, you call America democracy. Forgive me, I can't call it democracy because there's arrogance and ignorance. More African Americans are in jail and in parole than they are living. Well, how can you call that a democracy? I don't understand. What does it mean? So we have a strange world we live in. I want this world to change. And I think we should have an imagination, come out of this stupidity, what Albert Einstein said. Let's try to unify a new system. So my suggestion is, let's innovate, innovation, re-innovate innovation, relearn it, rethink it and redo it. And what do we do? When we validate innovation success, it should also be a combined, unified one, where we combine social gain, economic gain, environmental gain, education, knowledge, all these other gains are also included. We do not just validate it by one factor, but we should also consider. So let's do, as Rajesh said, I should do this politics. This is my politics for you. And this is, I think both Albert Einstein and Chris Freeman from heaven will definitely say, Mammo, you're okay. So we don't oppose you. And I'm pretty sure Carlota Perez will be with me also. So there will be no problem. So thank you very much. I think I have finished. I hope I haven't saved too many minutes. Is that 10 minutes?
All good.
Or less?
Thanks so much. Thank you, Mammo.
Right, Rasigan, thank you so much for all the nice things you do.
Excellent, Mammo. And also to congratulate you, Mammo. You actually saved us 2.5 minutes. So this is just so everyone knows it as well. We often have challenges from the past, yeah? But as we're speaking about this, maybe if you don't mind, Mammo, I use your 2.5 minutes to also share with people a text that you may remember from 1958. It predates me a little bit, yes? But it's another text by now. And, you know, as you've been speaking, I just want to read the 3 lines from the back cover for you, yeah? Prof. Bernal points out it would be possible to industrialize all of the underdeveloped countries of Asia in 10 to 20 years. A planned international program of development using the resources now employed to build weapons would provide every person in the world with a living standard equivalent to that of Western Europe. When one considers the poverty of millions of Africans and Asians, this is monumental indeed. Colleagues, that was 1958. And as Mammo correctly points out, we're in 2021 and seem to be reliving the nightmare that befalls us all, yes? So please be encouraged. History really matters, but we need to take the lessons in hand. As has been shared across from Judith, Carlota, Alan as well, we've got such a rich literature to draw from. Yeah? But we must really wield this literature towards the object of achieving development. You know, this is primarily what's holding us all back. And Mammo's entreaty to all of us to rethink. I would, if you don't mind, Mammo, supplement that, but by also encouraging us to be critical about the information we receive, and more importantly, how we present that information back. The more we repeat terms that are irrelevant, that actually lead us down the route to the type of genocides we are facing, is what compounds our situation. And we have to be clear about our own complicity and culpability in perpetuating such. And I think Mammo and myself know this quite well, but we really must encourage all to embrace such a critical position. You know, I love the way in which you define the infinites, Mammo, and the one infinite that we do know as well. It's not just the ignorance component, yeah? And there is the infinite possibility of us learning as well. And that's the part that we really need to embrace, and especially those that assume themselves to be leaders. And maybe the criteria for being a leader is that you learn well. Yeah. So thanks, Mammo. Thanks for that. Yeah. And I use that also a segue. Our colleague Bitrina from East Africa is going to be speaking next. And as Bitrina takes the floor, Bitrina, are you with us? I'm just checking on the screen here.
Yeah, I'm around. Can you hear me?
Thanks. Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you, Bitrina.
Yes,
Mammo,
let me
ask if you just
thank you. Let me join my colleagues to very sincerely thank you for inviting me to this very important panel. I also want to thank those who actually thought of this series for Freeman. I've been attending some in the past, and I think they are very good. I'm going to talk about policy and politics as expected, but mostly I'll talk about Africa, but because that is the context it is the context I know best. And let me say that actually innovation system can very fruitfully be used for Africa's development. And I will also make a bit of reference to some politics that might actually impede that process. And to start with, let me reiterate the fact that innovation is important, it's crucial for development. Innovation is systemic, and policy matters. So these three things. And when it comes to policy making, basically what is important for policy making is evidence. And we have been talking about this, and I think Chris has been very, very emphasizing the need to actually come up with truth. And these truths are what will actually inform policies. And when we look at innovation theories, what we see is that these theories have been informed by empirical evidence, actually from the now developed countries. It's very little is coming from poor countries such as Africa. So to be able to use those theories, when we are talking about systems of innovation, whether it's national or local, we actually need to kind of test the theories. We kind of need to adapt the theories. And that is the role of us innovation scholars. And for me, when it comes to Africa, innovation, the systemic nature of innovation can really not be, I don't think it is appropriate to talk at the systemic nature of innovation at the national level when it comes to Africa. Why? Because Africa, most of the African countries are very heterogeneous, actually. They are very diverse in so many ways. When we talk about, for instance, economic activities, you find that there are several sectors, big sectors, like agricultural sector, there's manufacturing sector, there are mineral sectors, there's service sector, and technologies and actors, and the way they relate in these sectors, they are completely different. So you cannot just have an umbrella national systems of innovation. So for me, it's important that we look at the systemic nature of innovation at the local level. Yeah. Yes. For instance, the issue of cluster initiative, and I can attest to that. Actually, this has been used usefully, actually, to develop. And I can even mention cases from Tanzania. So what I'm stressing is that for Africa, innovation systems should be looked at the local level and sectoral levels, not at the national level. At the national level, basically it will not work. Having said this, we know that there are policy and politics, actually, they go together. So sometimes the process of policy making, you do research, you come up with the policy proposals, but that policy proposals can sometimes be influenced by politics, you know. At times you'll find that the decisions that are being made by those with power in countries do not necessarily be based on objective, you know, on what society needs, but could be because of some political priorities that are biased, that are subjective. For instance, you can talk about when it comes to knowledge production. For instance, there are a lot of biases in who produces this knowledge, whose knowledge counts when we are making policies. There are a lot of politics around that. And this is not good for policy making. If you look at the history of science itself, it's not actually free from politics. Science has already been always been political. For instance, projects at the national level, some of the scientific projects that are picked, that get funded, could be just for political reasons. And sometimes even the direction of inventive activities, it can be influenced by factors that are political, not necessarily objective. So politics plays a lot. And even when research that is actually relevant, that is objective, have been carried out, in most cases, those who have power to make policies, they do not necessarily take on board these policies. They can decide actually, and this is actually the case for most, decide they base policies on some subjective criteria that is actually good for individual kind of, you know, power, for those who are in power. But this is, we are used to this kind of politics, especially when we talk about the concept of research policy linkage. This is a very popular concept, and as some of us researchers from think tanks, actually that is the area that we deal with. So we know how to handle it. We can handle it. We are doing it, and we have been influencing policies. But my worry, what is currently emerging right now, when you look at the discussion on innovation, whether at theoretical level or at policy level, you find that this is the way I see it. It's not so much objective. The debate, the currently emerging debate, because I actually looked at the way innovation studies has been unfolding from the beginning, from the linear model of innovation, from all the models that are in between national systems of innovation. You find that knowledge has been incremental and additive. You know, it's not revolutionary. But what we are seeing right now, what is emerging, is a departure from this smooth path of knowledge generation and policies that followed. Because during the era of a linear model of innovation, we had a policy that was actually linear, but basically basing on R&D, and R&D indicators are actually the measure of innovation. But that was from the theoretical. It came from the theoretical standpoint that innovation is basically R&D. But as people studied, and they came up, no, it's not linear, it's systemic, and policy moved along with that, you know. And most of the policies, when you look out, they talk about system, they talk about linkage between industry and the universities, they talk about demand, you know, users, suppliers, which is very important. But when you look at what is happening right now, there is a clear departure from this smooth move of production of evidence and truth, you know, as very much valued by Chris. It's a departure because you don't see evidence. Like when the issues of, I may mention the issue of social innovation. You trace and you don't find objective, you don't find empirical evidence that informs that thing. It's very difficult. And even on this other transformative innovation policy consortium, it's called the third frame, which is actually supposed to follow the national systems of innovation. I was expecting, you know, very objectively being connected to this, but reading it, you find that it is so much disconnected. So we ask questions. Where is this coming from? Is this being informed by objective science? Is it being influenced by some political, for some reasons? So we don't know. This is my views, and I mean, others have their own views, but this is my view. So in conclusion, what I want to say, this is politics and policy, is that problems in poor countries, innovation system problems and development, they are actually policy problems. The challenge is at the policy, it's the policy making process, but us as scholars who are supposed to actually produce evidence, you know, to inform this policy, we also have a role to play. And I think we have to really play this role so that correct policies are being made and then development happen in poor countries. For the time being, this is my submission. Maybe later on I can take up. I'm not sure whether I have addressed I try to address all the questions raised in the process.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bitrina. Don't worry about the completeness. You have shared with us your experiences, and that's really so important. It's also good seeing you. And I think something that's quite important as you raise it, and it's been raised also in the chat group, this quest for the truth, you know, it's also something that throws a particular challenge back to us. The lack of evidence is also a challenge to those of us in academia about what constitutes the evidence and what work we'll do towards establishing methodologies and forms of inquiry that generate appropriate evidence. As you well know, Bitrina, someone's evidence for something in another context could very well be the evidence against it. Yeah. And we know this very well, especially in the African context, where we constantly have to deal with people trying to parachute their policies onto us, somehow with the miraculous hope that we are going to be like them. Now, we have to remind people they are like us. And to that extent, a bigger capacity is actually us all learning from experimenting and trying to do things with the object of redressing the challenges we face. So thanks so much, Bitrina. You know, I made those extra words, if you don't mind, because I was going to turn around and say, we are now going to do the 5-minute responses if anyone in the first 2 sub-themes had additional points. I didn't want to come to you immediately to give you a chance as well to hear what the other colleagues say. So if that's all right, Bitrina, we're going to just rewind, and not rewind, we'll just circle back to Carlota and run down the line. If people had an additional thought that they wanted to share, please prepare yourself for that. Once we've run through this, you have a maximum of 5 minutes to make a response, colleagues. As we do that, and we come to the end of that session, so Bitrina, we're coming back to you to close that part as well, right? Excellent. And it will give you a chance also to check whether there's sufficient evidence for us doing that. So as we do that, colleagues, please be encouraged, you raise it. Once we complete this round, we will be taking that brief 10-minute break. As I said, some of us may have organic, others may have synthetic needs that we need to fulfill, and we'll go and do that. But I also want to ask if Judith if you could please kindly send us your slides. Rajesh has kindly.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have already received. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
One more thing, KJ will join in another 10 minutes. So I think by the end of the round of revisit, we will have him.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, maybe exerting a little more executive powers, and I hope people don't see me, especially Bitrina, acting like a politician maybe, but as KJ joins us, please be aware, KJ has not been privy to our discussion to date, so I'd rather that we hang on to KJ into the next, after the break, we pick up KJ. It would be unfair on KJ and the rest of us to just throw him in after people finish their 5 minutes. Okay, Rajesh? Excellent. Thank you so much. So Carlota, if we come back to you, you've heard a lot, you've heard the reflections. Is there something you'd like to add? Or even maybe subtract, please. And unmute yourself, please, Carlota.
Idea. Subtract would be a good idea. No, I think it's been very interesting, and I don't think I need to take any more time. I mean, unless I'm forced to, there was nothing that I thought there were going to be questions, but basically, I don't have anything in particular to add now. So maybe we save that time for questions eventually.
Thank you so much, Carlota. Yes. Thanks, Carlota. Alan, can I ask you, besides some of our bibliographic information we've been sharing on the chats, is there something you wanted to also add? Alan, are you there?
You can hear me? You can hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
No, you caught me by surprise, but what I'm going to show you, it's something I'm now working on. This is a book, I hope inspired by the work of Chris and also the work of Carlota, which is entitled Hubris. Now, hubris is a very interesting concept because it was actually evolved in Athens under the rule established by Solon. Solon replaced the draconian constitution in which aristocrats were entitled to kill everybody who was in debt to them or enslave them, right? And this was leading to the collapse of the Athenian system. Solon replaced it in a system in which there was so-called Athenian democracy, and you know, he made some changes. It was a class compromise, and basically the poor classes, first of all, debt slavery was abolished, and second, the juries were expanded to include these people. So I discovered when I was researching the concept of hubris, because hubris is a concept of arrogant pride, that in Athens, hubris was a crime. You could actually accuse somebody of being arrogant, treating you in an arrogant and proud manner. And listening to the contributions we've just had, I feel that if this could be reintroduced as a crime that the International Criminal Court might wish to consider in relation to some of the things that the richer nations are doing, it would be a good thing. Now, I'm now going to share with you 3 graphs, I hope, from this, which illustrate also the issue of evidence. Now, I hope this works because it is right. I've just been doing a bit of IMF research. And if you look at the annual reports of the IMF from 1993 onwards, they always used to have a historical trend graph. Okay, so the interesting thing is, if you look at the 1999 8 report, it shows a flat line as the trend, which is the average. It doesn't infer any historical trend. If it then evolves, when they introduced this purchasing power parity weights, they got a trend line which started going upwards. So in successive reports, they reported every time better trend, just as the economy was getting worse. So by the time we got to 2004, we have, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the most ludicrous graph I've ever seen from an economist, because the trend line is completely out of control. They've also demoted the growth in the 1970s, which you'll recall were the development decades, down to 3. They've demoted it down to 3% instead of the 4% where they had it before. So they've demoted the period in which they think the South was doing the wrong stuff, and then they've promoted the area in which was just before the 2008 financial crash. Now, this is hubris. Where does hubris stem from? It's this belief. It's a belief system I think economics is fundamentally a belief system, which is why its method of evidence is what we used to call a policy-based evidence. You know, you have a theory and you look for the evidence which will support it, without sometimes realizing how ludicrous the results is. Now, somewhere around 2008, somebody must have got the ear of Christine Lagarde, whoever it was in charge, and said, look, this doesn't make us look a bit silly. So they then flipped to the next graph. Now, in this, they actually disaggregate what's happening in the advanced countries from what's happening in the rest of the world. And you can see what's going on, which is that the world growth is being taken over by things that are going on outside the heartlands. And the heartlands are actually doing very bad. But at the same time, they dropped the historical graph. So you are now only looking at what the advanced countries were doing in the preceding 3 years, which means that the one thing you don't see is the historical long-term decline of the northern economies that was going on and had been going on. Actually, I'm researching this, but it seems to have been going on since the early 1950s. There's a long, there are ups and downs, but it basically keeps going down. Now, the thing is here that the evidence that has been selected because of the hubristic beliefs of what I'm going to call the Columbian nations, the nations who are alleged to have been created by Columbus, are actually completely fake news. I mean, not fake news in the sense of deliberate lies, but in the sense that the beliefs of the economists have so influenced the choice of evidence that they make that the result is no longer credible to anybody else. So I just think I wonder what Chris would have made of that. I mean, this was happening in his time. Perhaps we know what he made of that. And when I read the articles that Carlota has given us to put on the website, one of the things I'm going to look for is whether he made any mention of this data idiocy is the only word I can find to describe it. So that's my remark.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks so much, Alan, and also for reminding us about how critical this issue is. It's not just the data and our interpretation, but it's also our capacity, our competency, our capability to generate the data itself. And much of the counterfactual to those graphs that you show is exactly the data that comes from the regions that are experiencing these significant spurts. And that's where we have, and I know in Africa, South America, and Asia, a lot more has been done now to improve at least some of the statistics and data. But we're still nowhere near being able to offer a complete and encyclopedic view, connecting all of the data together itself. So that remains a task. And I think it links very much to what Bitrina was lamenting as well towards the end. It remains for us a critical task. Judith, can I ask if there's something you wanted to come in on, both for adding and subtracting, as we know we need to do?
Well,
Judith, please.
Well, thank you very much. I was thinking about the issue of data and the issue of indicators. In our countries, I think that I can speak also for Africa, but I am not sure. We have, I would say, around 10 times less researchers per 1 million inhabitants or whatever, the way you measure, let's say, the stock of researchers. And people are very, very, very concerned about that. And of course, scientists want to have more scientists, more equipment, more fellowships, more. And the problem is that you are looking only to one side of the problem. Because if you look at where do these researchers work, how is the distribution of the labor market for researchers in Uruguay? 81% of all the researchers in Uruguay work in academia. And the only country that is a bit different is Argentina, because it's a trick, because CONICET implies that there is a lot of researchers in government. But it doesn't matter who paid the salary, the problem is what they do. So this is the kind of little thing that we should think more. To look in the labor market for researchers, to realize that in our countries, researchers are stocked are enjailed in academia. And this is because the productive structure does not need them. It's obvious. And this has to do with the issue that we do very little for ourselves. We import too much. Remember Freeman when he said that importing technology and making technology at home are not alternative. They need to be combined, because if not, what you are getting is voluntary underdevelopment. Remember that. And that is really something very important. And the last thing I would like to say, profiting from the wonderful opportunity to be, I would say, surrounded. It is a very strange thing to say surrounded when you are in front of a screen. But let's say that we are surrounded by so many young people from all over the world. Let me tell you, I know very little about what is written in Africa and what is written in Asia. I read almost from the North. I read, of course, a little bit more from Latin America. We should, I don't know exactly how, but we should start reading us more often. We need to know each other much better. I think that Freeman would like that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Judith. A really important entreaty to all of us as well. And as we advance on this, I want to move swiftly to our colleague. I'm sorry. Mammo, can I check? Is there something you wanted to add in? Professor Muchie, are you there? Okay, as I don't see Mammo's name on the screen, can I ask, if you don't mind, Rajesh, just to check
I think Mammo is not near the system. Mammo is present, but he's not there. KJ has joined. KJ Joseph has joined. What do you think about his intervention now? Is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to, if you don't mind, Rajesh, can we just close the loop and allow Bitrina, if there's something she wanted to raise, and then we can move to KJ. Is that all right? Excellent. So Bitrina, sure. Just to follow through and give you the second chance, is there things in addition, especially with the comments that have come through, that you want to respond to? And then we'll get Professor KJ Joseph to give us his first input.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I was checking the comments there. There is actually nothing that I can respond to when it comes to comments. But let me try to emphasize my last point, because I think this is very important. When I talked about policy and theory, they go together. And knowledge production, who produces, imbalances and biases in who produces, whose knowledge counts. Right now, when you look at innovation, the recent literature and the direction that the literature is taking is the issue of growth. Growth, innovation has always been very central to growth. And we know that growth is very important for development. Talk about social inequality, anything, growth is a must. But the current debate on innovation is actually undermining growth. And this is exactly what Africa needs. Africa needs growth. It's not on the sustainable growth path. So I'm asking myself, who is producing this knowledge that is undermining growth? Is it somebody from Africa, somebody thinking of Africa's development, or who is this? And there is another phenomena that is happening when it comes to innovation theories and policies. we are moving away from innovation for poverty alleviation. It's the issue of inequality environment, and yet in Africa, poverty is increasing. So we ask questions, or who produces knowledge, whose knowledge counts, and for what purpose, So I'm re-emphasizing my last point that as scholars, both from from North, from the poor countries, we have to come up with truth, whether we are researching in the context of developed countries, where it is researching on the context of poor country, we have to come with truth, with evidence about innovation. Excellent. So that we make meaningful policies.
Thanks so much, Bitrina. It's really important, and it's really good you keep re-emphasizing the point as well. I think if we connect together with even the initial comment from Carlota explaining to us how Chris approached some of these challenges as well, something quite important that was raised there is not just growth as it's currently measured, but us giving content to what that growth actually means. If the growth is the extraction and exploitation of ourselves, I would believe that it's a minus quality. If, however, it's the expansion of productive capabilities, capacities, and competencies, and improving our developmental status, then yes, that's positive. But unfortunately, Bitrina, as you well know, these are used ambiguously, especially for multilateral organizations. And I think it's right that you remind people to be skeptical about who carries the message and what it portrays. Ultimately, it's our own experiences that need to be reflected. And if we look at what people have been raising in the chat as well, a key issue is about how we share information. What are the effects of development taking place and how this impacts on us currently? So that gives us also a good segue. And I see Rajesh has now managed to cajole Professor KJ Joseph into joining the conversation, but also making his presentation. Is that all right, KJ? Sorry to throw you in this, but I'm sure you'd manage. KJ, will you unmute and show us your picture?
Okay. Rasigan, I was supposed to say something.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mammo, we'll have to come back to you. You missed your chance, you know that, about being in the queues and lines.
But
yeah. Let KJ speak. Yeah?
I think it's always a pleasure, and Rasigan, you are never wrong. Okay.
Oh. No hubris, please.
I was first of all for very unavoidable reasons. I couldn't be on time, and I lost a great deal because I am not very. I was deprived of. I'm very sure the excellent reflection, which would have happened at the instance of the speakers who spoke before me. But at the same time, I think I have being the I think I'm the last speaker. I wanted to be the last speaker, but I'm deprived of being the last speaker because Mammo is going to be the last. It looks like Mammo, I envy you again. It's very bad. Okay, I think let me get into business. See, I'm extremely happy that the series of lectures on Chris Freeman's contribution has now is culminating in a series of panel wherein I think people with a lot of experience and expertise and exposure to development problem on the one hand and innovation system and its nurturing, the whole concept. I think there are people who are speaking who have been instrumental in evolving the whole concept of innovation system and taking the agenda. And these people are made to reflect upon, I must say, perhaps the questions of the century. The way in which the questions have been articulated, in my view, clearly indicates the young generation's ability to assimilate and reflect upon the context in which they live in and to raise right questions. And I think the depth and the width of the questions raised will, I would say, necessitate another dozens of panels like this. I'm sure, I think we are, this kind of 2 panels or 2 days discussion cannot do justice, but I'm sure the whole effort I will consider a great success, provided this induces the young generation to think through and take forward the true agenda of development and the role of innovation therein. And in fact, the whole question of the role of Chris Freeman's thought process, and more precisely, I would say, to the extent that innovation system, the concept of national innovation system and globalics at large is the progeny of Christopher Freeman's original thinking. I'm sure that the what tribute that we can give to Chris Freeman in his 121st century is continuing debate and discourse on this question. I'm sure this is going to be just a beginning, and I take this occasion to compliment in a bountiful manner the organizers, particularly Rajesh and the young the alumni of Globalix community. And I must also say that this also, in essence, shows the character of Globalix as a network that provides the space for any member to come up and express his capability and display his competence and bring together people to reflect on issues of common concern. And that's exactly what happened. And I must also say that when you are talking about development in the South, as a student of development economics, I never ever heard Christopher Freeman in any of the development economics textbook. And even when development studies, when there was a new branch that broke out from conventional development economics to development studies, even there was no Christopher Freeman over there, my dear friends. And the question which we need to understand that the whole idea of innovation system and the national system of innovation, the term which was adapted by Christopher Freeman from the work of Frederick List, National System of Political Economy, and the concern quintessentially was to facilitate the transformation of a developing country, that is what worried Christopher. Worried Frederick List. And so also I must say that this is also a question that worries the Globalix community. To what extent, how, and this is exactly what our youngsters are posing the challenge on us. And I must say that having associated with this network from the second year of its inception onwards, I must say that the manner in which this community has been conducting its affairs, the manner in which it has been incorporating the young minds and particularly those from the South, the manner in which it has been incorporating the scholars from the South and trying to address the problems in the South. And there is no parallel in any of the comparable networks. And secondly, and more importantly, we should also know that going by the scientometric work of Jan Fagenberg and Szapiro, you know that innovation is today considered as there is no shortcut to prosperity but to be innovative. And innovation, in the innovation studies, national system of innovation has become the most popular approach. And we know that we don't claim that national system of innovation is a theory or it's not a framework, as Bendeke Lundahl would say. It is rather at best a focusing device. And on these two, and I think I would like to kind of address the whole problematic in the sense with this basic background. These two basic backgrounds, the manner in which the Globalix community has been contributing towards, and also the manner in which the national system of innovation has emerged. And especially notable is the contribution which national, I mean, the way in which with the African continent, the idea of putting Africa first, you know. In fact, I remember a great contribution of a Mammo in this regard. Now, the point which now, as far as I'm concerned, I think all of you will agree that the developing countries today are at the crossroads. Perhaps the challenging problematic that they are facing today is in essence, in any manner, if you consider gauge it, it is much more intense than the counterparts of developing countries after the Second World War when they got the political independence. At that time, they had the kind of, in essence, they had the concern of transforming the underdeveloped economies to growing economies. And today we know that. And those countries after the political independence, they to begin with, most of them worked with import substitution, state-oriented policies. And thereafter, during the last 40 to 50 years, they have been experimenting with globalization. And today, globalization and under global, the outcome of globalization, we know that while it has been able to create what is called create growth, at least in some segment of the societies, the prosperity so created was not equitably distributed. So much so that the development was not, the growth that was not inclusive. And how to address this problematic? I would like to, I mean, how to account for that? I would like to look at least, draw your attention to two issues. To begin with, how the problematic, how do we use to conceive the mainstream policy community used to consider innovation? Innovation to them was essentially what is called, to begin with, the residue. And thereafter it became the knowledge, of course. What kind of knowledge? The produced knowledge, the R&D based knowledge, the scientific knowledge. And that scientific knowledge is essentially created by what is called multinationals, and naturally the developing countries under the market forces got integrated with the world market, and naturally got into global production network. And very often than not, they were not integrated with integrity. I would like to say that in the global production network, potato producers remain potato producers, and potato chip producers remained as potato chip producers, and microchip producers remained as, I mean, they, and you know, this means it involves a lot of difference in terms of development. The question which I want to ask is, as far as we, you know, that the way in which we construe under innovation system framework, Lundwall and others have articulated the concept of knowledge, not only in terms of science-based knowledge, not only those so-called documented knowledge, but also the synthetic knowledge, the experience-based knowledge, the doing, using, interacting mode of knowledge, along with the STA mode of knowledge. The question which we need to ask is how the mainstream economic policies community has been taking into account this. And then you find that if there is a deficit in that this will take you nearer to the thinking of Amartya Sen, while the global innovation community was under Christopher Freeman and others were talking about learning, innovation, and competence building systems. Parallelly, we have been hearing what Amartya Sen was talking in terms of capabilities and freedoms. And these capabilities and freedoms and these learning and innovation competence building systems properly articulated essentially means that you adopt a strategy of walking on two legs of not only STI mode of learning, but also DUI mode of knowledge or science-based knowledge. What is called, I would like to say that if the growth under globalization has not been able to contribute to a desirable developmental outcomes like mitigating or reduced in inequalities. I mean, you know that what Piketty and others talking. This I would like to attribute to the absence of, or rather, failure to build the learning, innovation, and competence building systems of individuals and organizations, which in turn would have led to what is called a balanced growth of knowledge, both the experience of both the DUI mode and the STI mode, or both the scientific knowledge and synthetic knowledge. And somewhere went wrong. And this is here that again, if you are really interested, if one is really exploring that, we have to look for, following Amartya Sen, what are the institutional architecture that created passive, active, instrumental, and other forms of exclusion. And that in turn got into the process of production of knowledge, exclusion, and also the use of knowledge. So I'm happy to say that on these matters, innovation and development itself has got 4 special issues. That's viewed. I'm trying to say that viewed in this way, the policymakers of today are much better endowed with much more of a knowledge base, much more of an experience-based understanding of this thing and documented knowledge on this, thanks to the Global X network. And I would say that this is, in fact, again, the legacy of Chris Freeman, that today we have got much better understanding on this problem. So if a policymaker wants to exploit, and we have much more knowledge, we are much better informed today than, say, in the 1950s and 1960s. But the key question which I want to ask is, now, as a network, how much we have been able to kind of integrate ourselves in practice, in theory, in practice and policy? I am inclined to believe that we have a long, long distance to go. At the same time, I'm happy to say that the basic ingredients of such integration has already been made thanks to the establishment of the regional links. We have the regional network in Asia, Africa, Africa links, India links, SICA links, Euro links, so on and so forth. And these regional networks in the years to come, I would like to see as the kind of key instruments of transmitting such ideas to policy community. But then the question which I would like to ask you is that today, again, we are at another problematic in terms of we are having what is the 4th industrial revolution. On the one hand, we have got this globalization reduced challenge. Superimposed on that today is what is called the 4th industrial revolution. And what does it mean to developing countries? And what does it mean for the Global X community in terms of policy, practice, and theory? And I would like, in my view, if you were to ask me, what is a developing country? And what is a developed country? I would like to say that developing countries are those who have sadly missed the first 3 buses of industrial revolution. Africa is there because Africa missed all the 3 buses. And Africa is there because they miserably failed in the Green Revolution, which Jeffrey Sachs and others argue. Now, the point which I want to say that this 4th industrial revolution, this is something which the developing countries cannot afford. This bus they cannot afford to miss. Now, the key question is that we have got evidences in a recent paper which is not published. It's already put up in our website of journal, our journal. Cecilia and Bendo case arguing the data giants practice their kind of innovative practices. How does it adversely affect the whole process? In fact, the challenges that, and particularly as a person who worked on WTO and trade-related issues, there are severe deficit in institutional innovations. Because of on the one hand, 4th industrial revolution in terms of what we talk in terms of big data or machine learning or robotics, these are not. I think my time is getting over, that's what I mean. Okay, the point which I want to say that, what I would like to say, 4th industrial revolution is essentially a process wherein knowledge is brought to the center stage of the indicator, the barometer of where you are, what you are. And if you are not able to, but now the point which I want to say is that, no, this is it. And the question which with the Global X community and university of scholars is that, how are we going to do this? How are we going to equip the developing countries to address this challenge? I will take 1 more minute. Here I would like to say that there is a positive. See, last month we had the state of Kerala. We have in fact, I must say that our finance minister, the government has come up with an idea of transforming Kerala to a knowledge economy. Kerala model of development, etc., etc. Amartya Sen has talked a lot, and building on to those initial conditions. Kerala has actually, and in fact, I'm happy to say that quite many of the Global X community participated in a the consultation, and the enormity of ideas that came up in terms of ensuring that Kerala get transformed into an inclusive knowledge society. The insight was incredible. My dear friends, I would like to say that such interventions by the Global X community at the level of regional X, and which will enable each of these regional communities or the developing country concerned to develop innovation systems with Costa Rica with the Costa Rica characteristics, Tanzania with the Tanzania characteristics, Kerala with the Kerala characteristics. And if we are not able to do this at this juncture, I would like to say that this is going to be the greatest injustice that we can do, not only to the originators of this concept and the network, and also to the poor people who are those who are lagging behind in development. And I'm very sure that the kind of dynamism that our generation, the alumni and others showing, is an incredibly positive signaling, and that makes me very, very proud of being one among them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, KJ. Thanks so much, KJ. I want to raise some of the issues you've raised, but if you don't mind, just because we've overshot the time now by 2 minutes, I need to call it back and pull people back in line because of that. So, Mammo, you had indicated a point, but you'd also written us a long text, and also we have Bengtoke wanting to make a point as well. So, Mammo, can we start with you, please? Unmute.
I'm muted. So thank you so much. Very interesting discussion and very productive discussion. I just want to say I understand all the innovation theory has evolved and there are many things have been written, but the dominant variable that is critically important has been the economic side. But we do need, if we take context to matter, for example, in the African context, what we lack is social capital. It's not financial capital, physical capital, all these other capitals. The two critical capitals are social capital and natural capital. And those two things, we are very weak. And I think we need also innovation theory on social capital and innovation theory also on nature. How do we also include the natural world? How do we also do? The other critical thing we need to also address is what we said, the health side and the well-being side. We also need systems of innovation to be also reformulated, redone, worked to address how do we address poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So the context specific matters because countries like Africa, we've gone through slavery, colonialism, imperialism, and now Africa has not reached the post-colonial time. It is still under tremendous neocolonialism. Sincerely, for example, over 65% of the reserves of 14 African countries is in French banks. And the French, when these countries want to take their money back, they pay interest to French banks. This is horrible. Actually, they were more free when France was directly colonizing them than when now. This is the reality in Africa. We are in a very difficult time. So we do need, really, the context matters. So we need to address that. I think those are the kind of things I just wanted to say. Let me just add things. Another important point I want to add is economic growth is not the same as economic development. So the economic development and the country growing doesn't mean that country developing in the sense that all the people are gaining and their welfare, their income, everything is increasing. So we also need to address how to also relink innovation and development. For example, the Global X network is doing innovation development. What does it mean? It's not innovation and growth, which is quite nice, but we also need to know what do we mean by innovation, what do we mean by development, how do we relink it, is extremely important. And that is something we need to systematically. The other thing is what Chris Freeman used to say about the transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary thing, problem-based learning, work-based integrated learning, work-based integrated research, problem-based research, project-based research, context-specific research is extremely important. These are the things we don't do very well. And what we need now is that Lewis Wolpert, not Lewis Wolpert, Wilson, he wrote in 1998 a book on consilience of science, where he says the natural sciences, the human sciences, and the engineering, all this have to be integrated. Again, innovation system has to also relink. Even Chris also has said it. How do we also bring in the different disciplines in for solving problems than really saying in this discipline I shine or not? Albert Einstein was not just a physicist. He was what we call an organic intellectual. He has thought about philosophy, about many things. When I read about him, I just love him. I really mean it, because the thinking he had was extraordinary. And also when they tried to take him to politics and tell him to be a president of Israel, he said no. Things like that. We do need values like this. Just the last point I want to make is the virtual world and the physical world. Now there are more mobile phones are being used by countries like Kenya than America. I'm sincerely telling you, we're now literally awash with all these technologies that's happening. Look what we're doing now. We're all over the world. The whole world is here, but we are now talking because of this technology. If that is what's happening, there's something very, very important that I read from the International Commission on Financing Global Education Opportunity, the United Nations General Assembly in 2016. They said 2 billion or half of all current jobs are projected to disappear by the year 2030 due to automation. To continue to progress at the current pace by 2030, half of all the youth, over 800 million young people, will not have basic secondary education level skills needed to keep up in a new economy. It is clear that globalization, advancing technology, and changing employment threaten to leave many behind. If that is the case, especially countries like what we are here in Africa, we may have the youth in a very difficult situation. So what does it mean? The virtual world has advantage, meaning technology is everywhere, we're borderless, but on the other hand, we also may lose jobs, we may not have new jobs. If we have the situation, how do we again create a situation where this virtuality is not? And that's why I have been here in South Africa, and so nice, some of the students, now they tell me what ventures they have started. I like us to develop new approaches, even in the learning side, where we definitely develop the virtual and the physical world do not mismatch, but there's some integration. A win-win outcome comes from this.
Professor
Sorry,
Mammo.
I took a bit of time. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
did I take time?
Yes, you did. But also, but Mammo, you lose good points by doing that. But so back to the issues that you had raised, and we also have Bentoke, I think, wanting to make a comment as well. So I'm just going to switch very quickly and allow Bentoke to make the point. If you were keen on Bentoke, please, you're welcome.
No, it was a misunderstanding.
Okay.
I have commented many things along this lecture series, so I will leave the time to the rest of you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Bentoke. And it's brilliant as we are picking this up, and we're about to go into our break session now. Just for 10 minutes to give people a chance, maybe get some refreshment, some caffeine, or whatever else keeps you going. As you do that itself, and Mammo, as I mentioned, you really made some really good points, but we also have to ensure consistency in terms of how we describe things. You correctly point out when you compare Kenya to USA, those are countries, but Africa is not a country. And this is an issue that we need to constantly be dealing with because of where we live. In a similar form, it's lovely to talk about the boundaries between areas being blurred. But if you cannot afford to pay as you go, it doesn't matter what connectivity you have, you are excluded. So this is very important. And I think there's some of the points that people have raised. I just love the euphemistic way in which we talk about the countries setting the agenda and refuse to acknowledge that we are talking about core capitalist economies and how they relate to world systems. So I'm going to leave that as a more contentious point and allow us to get some refreshment, but I leave it specifically as a challenge also, because when we return, we are going to be dealing with some of the forward-looking, what's on the horizon, what are the challenges for innovation systems thinking and the research we would like to take forward. We've got 3 good speakers lined up, so please, colleagues, take the break and come back. And Rajesh has promised to play us at least allow a showing of Judith's slides so that we see what Matilda actually had to deal with. Thanks, colleagues. And we see you in 10 minutes, yes?
Before sharing Judith's slides, there was a request from Professor Sulan Fu about this program. So briefly, as an advertisement, it is from Oxford University. Professor Fu has requested to share it. So for a few minutes, 1 minute or so. So if it is done, we will move on to Professor Judith's slides that we missed during the presentation.
Rahir, you have animations. You have animations.
Okay. I think, can I move on to the next slide? Is it okay?
No, you have to push because there are animations.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me see. Oh, okay. Okay. This okay, Professor? This is the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I think you can speak. You can explain it. I'll
no, I don't think so. People are having a well-deserved rest. So let them rest, please.
Excellent point, Judith, as well.
Go ahead. Now? Oh, where is Mafalda? That's a problem. Yes, here it is. Okay, you can put it. Okay.
This is an excellent slide. Rajesh, can I encourage you to leave the slide on as people then can return from...
Sure.
Constantly remind everyone, you need not stand on your head. You just need to reset your head.
I think that Kino is really a genius. And I try to make my classes with Kino, but you know, young generation have forgotten him. And this is really a pity because he gives a lot of insights. Okay, so Alan wanted to see the Mafalda and
Excellent, Judith. Thanks so much for sharing this, yeah? So, I hope people are enjoying the last 3 minutes of the break and starting to prepare to return to our seminar. We're going to go into the third sub-panel once everyone's returned in the next 2 minutes.
I think we have all the panelists in the last segment.
So, thanks so much for that, Rajesh, as well. Yeah. So, good colleagues, welcome back. I hope everyone has had sufficient and appropriate breaks that's allowed you to recharge and allow us to go into the last sub-panel. We really are happy to have with us Lena, Marina, and Keun, who are going to follow in that order itself. I thought maybe a good segue to link us into this session is KJ had mentioned in his intervention previously that we must ensure that no one misses the bus when it comes to the technological revolutions that surround us. I would modify that slightly, KJ, as I did in the intervention with the colleagues in India a few weeks back, and encourage us to be aware of who's driving the bus. It's very important recognizing that before you get on board. And it's very important for us as scholars as well. in terms of determining who has predetermined the agendas that we work on. And hopefully in this next session, as we tackle the new horizons for innovation systems research, we are able to embrace that. There's wonderful comments in the chat box, lots of cross-referencing to what colleagues have raised already. And these really do open up the possibilities for us. So with that note itself, Lena, can I ask if you are ready to pick up and take your slot?
Yeah.
Lena?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rasigan, and thank you for giving me this, who is driving the bus. So I will try to stick to that a bit. But first, I want to join the choir of thanking the organizers, and I'm really honored to be part of this panel. I will keep very close to the questions that was given to these themes and important questions, and I will humbly trying to contribute with some comments on the questions, 3 of the 4 questions. And the first question is actually 2, but I start with the first one, saying that can artificial intelligence and Industry 4.0 contribute to inclusive and sustainable economic development? Artificial intelligence, I think we know, and I had to be very sure about the Industry 4.0, and my understanding is that it's about large-scale machine learning, the Internet of Things, and robotics. So I want to make a statement here, or a kind of, if contribution to inclusive and sustainable economic development will be feasible, AI and I4, Industry 4.0, must in itself hold inclusive functions. So why do I say that? And first, I want to say that our worldview, our understanding of reality is finding its way right into the algorithms and software on which AI and I4 are built. And remember, our understandings of reality are limited at the same time as they have reality producing consequences. So I believe that no innocent position exists. And there is, as I see it, still a too limited group of people, programmers and computer scientists developing AI. And I'm a scholar in engineering faculties, so I meet them. That's the first reason. The other reason is that there is no doubt technologies co-evolve, and we have discussed that before. And it's co-evolve out of interaction in specific contexts. And this implies the responsibility to be a collective responsibility for where and how technologies travel and with what use. Once again, no innocent position exists. So the demand of us as knowledge and technology producers is focused on the direct reality producing consequences of our research, and thus put us right into the context of implication. Digital techniques, including AI and I4, intervenes in and creates people's everyday lives. And on the other hand, digital techniques and AI is something developed and interpreted by people. So I persist to appreciate Donna Haraway's statement that technology is not neutral. We are inside what we make. It is inside us, and we are living in a world of connections, and it matters which ones get made and unmade. When I followed the discussion of AI in the 90s via one of my former PhD students, and nowadays mostly in media, I see no discussion about inclusive AI, and please correct my ignorance here, but please let us discuss what that can constitute, I mean, inclusive AI. And let us keep in mind that by increasing the number of actors in the development of technical innovations, prerequisites are created to overcome the obstacles of techno-optimistic or techno-pessimistic attitudes. We must go beyond that. And I will join a webinar in later in April about machine learning to combat fake news and media manipulation. And I'm very curious to see what is there, if it is. So that was the first question here. Then it was about, do AI and I4 have a role in transforming informal sector activities in low-income countries? And as we have been said here, that AI and I4, or digital technology, developed in the global north, that is the high-income countries. I have only questions here. How do we avoid one-directed tech transfer once again? Why do we discuss and demand adaptability and resilience of AI and I4 without taking seriously the issues of responsibility, relevance, and context of application and implication? And I see that several of you have talked about this before today in a much better way than I can do. But anyhow, I want to say that. And informal sector is dominantly low tech in low income countries. And I don't always believe in top-down pressed leapfrogging or catching up. Catching up for what? And we can, in the ICT sector, we have actually examples how ICTs in low-income countries, in Africa especially, has how to say that in English? Is demanding, and not demanding, but they are in the forefront and before high-income countries. They are faster developed in low-income countries. Think of the mobile phones that you was thinking about versus the landline. Think of mobile money transfer and things like that. So in the ICT sector, I think that the global north have to look at the global south. And then the question two, if I allow myself to say something about that, it's about how to study national innovation systems at different income levels. What constitutes the theoretical core of the NSI concept? And the last here, how does NSI concept relate to alternative concepts such as triple helix and socio-technical systems? And I can only give some comments on the last thing here, saying that the triple helix or quadruple helix model is, as I understand it, and I have practiced it, a frame, but it is of course a big step forward to make explicit actors who need to cooperate in a more systemic way, but that is not enough. The how question remains, and an answer to the latter has for us as cooperating partners in East Africa and in Bolivia been what is called the Mo2 knowledge production. And that comes from first of all, from Gibbons et al. In their book of the new production of knowledge, and then the follow-up in the book of Novotny et al. Called Rethinking Science, Knowledge and the Public in an Age of Uncertainty. So in our collaboration, and what Bitrina also mentioned, cluster initiatives, that comes from the triple helix combined with Mo2 practices, fostering an emerging local innovation system that might sooner or later link up somewhere to emerging national innovation system. And then finally, there is the question 4 is about Thomas Keun and his book about the structure of scientific revolution. And the question is, how can we address theory change and evolution, allowing a greater participation of minorities in theory debate? For instance, women, Global South, critical thinking. So my comments here is that first, that women are not a minority group. It's more than half of the world's population. But I understand the question because women are a minority group when it comes to power, to influence, to ownership of resources of many kinds, etc. And especially in some parts of the world. So theory change with sustainable impact needs research transformation. And talking about research transformation in the academy, it seems still to be very provocative. But research transforming ambitions and trying transformations in the academy, gender research and feminist technoscience has contributed to that, although it's minor, but it's still there and it is international. And I would like again to say that Judith Sutz and Rodrigo Arocena with colleagues have answers to inclusive innovation with explicit and extremely inspiring research transforming objectives and practices. And finally, I want to say, and I have experienced that policy support is of utmost importance. It is. And I just want I need to say this again because it has meant so much for me in a Swedish context. We had a research bill in 1997 that was a counterbalance to the neoliberal dominance. It was called research, it is called Research and Society. And the core message in this research bill was relevance, cooperation, equality, global questions of fate, including climate, food security, and health. That was hope for me, but then it was a big backlash, but it was there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lena. Thanks so much for bringing these issues back as well. You know, we share with you the sentiment, women are not a minority. South Africa, it's over 51% of the population. Women also live longer than men, but that's also because of the particularly bad habits that many of the men in South Africa especially are consigned to. You know, the colleague that mentioned the point around minorities, there's something I just share with you. I had originally started studying law when I went to university, and I could never pass Roman law because I refused to write anything in support of slavery, no matter. And it was an impossible task, of course. But there's a component that carried over, and that was a perpetual minor. And minor here meant to be a person who's not an adult. And this was something then sprayed across, and all people, all Black people in South Africa were consigned to this fate. We were perpetually minors relative to the adult world that we inhabited. In other words, we could not make the rules. But Lena, thank you also because you remind us. And it's so critical that we continue to share this information. It's not that we are surprised by the crises because they emanate from contradictions that we have followed. In other words, we have analyzed. And tentatively amongst and within our community, we have constantly put forward progressive ideas and progressive solutions. Yeah. I think what is incumbent upon us is recognizing the extent to which we have actually advanced. As you quite correctly mentioned with the Swedish example, the rhetoric, once adopted, provides some level of protection. But unless that is mass-based across the society, unless it changes the inequalities that contribute to class society as we know it today, it's impossible for these to be permanent advances. The continuous clawback is to a return to profitability. This is what Alan was also hinting at earlier with his graphs, and we could even be using another language to describe why, no matter whether you call it social or anything else before the word capital, it has a particular logic attached to it. And that's what we need to keep in mind. So I'm going to shift across, and there's quite a stark contrast between the south of Sweden and Brazil, but it makes for an interesting comparison as well. So Marina, I hope you are still with us. You've now welcomed the day in Brazil. So Marina, if you would please take your slot. Excellent. Please, Marina.
Yes, thank you, Rasigan. So good afternoon to everybody. Here in Brazil, we are beginning our afternoon now. First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers and to thank for the invitation to participate in this tribute to Professor Freeman, whose work in memory I have admired since the beginning of my academic career. It's also a pleasure to be in this panel with some of my main academic references. The available time is very short, so my talk will focus on 3 main points. I will not answer all the questions addressed for this sub-panel. I will make a short introduction to my first contact with Freeman ideas. Then I will address 3 main points that in my opinion, are the theoretical core of innovation system approach to understand the global South development dynamics. And finally, I will suggest a theme that is not mentioned in the questions addressed for the section that I believe should be included in the new horizons for innovation system approach. So my first contact with innovation studies was through Professor José Cassiolato, who introduced me to Professor Freeman's ideas. Unfortunately, I didn't meet Professor Freeman in person, but I have been using his ideas to understand Brazil and the global South realities. My first work about the Brazilian innovation system was developed in the mid-90s, when the debate about the need to develop national innovation capabilities were opposed to the prevailing techno-globalism related ideas. The ideas and ideology of technological globalization, free market, and liberalization associated with the Washington Consensus at that time dominated the academic and policy debate in Latin America. At that time, the discourse was that technology was floating in the air, so that the developing countries should not worry about developing national productive and innovative capabilities. The borders between countries were melting away, and technology and innovation were easily available at any time and low cost. In this context, when we talked about innovation systems and the importance of developing national productive and innovative capabilities, we were treated almost like crazy people. It was in this context that I started my academic career, when I had the opportunity to participate in a really wonderful academic adventure, the creation of RDC in the end of the 90s, and in the beginning of the 2000, the birth of GlobalX community, and I'll talk about this later on. Since my first contact with the innovation literature, one of the characters of the broad innovation system approach that interested me the most was the importance given to history that was mentioned many times before in this panel. After learning different economic theories that ignored history and territorial specificities, the idea of considering these dimensions to understand innovation and development dynamics attracted me a lot. For me, since the beginning of my academic trajectory, the innovation system concept developed by Freeman and Lundvall was the best conceptual tool to understand the local dynamics of each territory. But at that time, there were not many people who agreed with these ideas. In the late 90s, innovation came into the center of the economic debate as some international organizations recognized the importance of knowledge for the development of nations. And the innovation system approach gained a significant space in the academic debate. Not always what has been called innovation system or referred to by innovation systems was the same concept created by Professor Freeman. Often, as Professor Reinert said in the first Global X conference in Rio de Janeiro in 2003, there is a risk, there was and there still is, a risk of putting a Schumpeterian icing on what is essentially a profoundly neoclassical way of thinking. And that has happened many times in our countries. But this is another problem to be addressed in another opportunity. In my view, the main points of Freeman's work which constitute the core of the IS concept and are crucial to understand the economic and social dynamics of the Global South are, first, that history matters, so do specific territorial conditions. In this case, any debate on the promotion of the development of countries or regions must take into account the historical process, the constitution of the institutional framework, and the productive system, among others. This means that there is no optimal innovation system or model of innovation system to be followed. Therefore, it makes no sense for developing countries to try to replicate the development trajectory of developed countries. In this context, the pursuit of catch-up strategies or development strategies through insertion in global value chains, for example, are not possible or reasonable development paths for less developed countries. These points have important normative implications that to copy productive and innovative development policies adopted in developed countries does not work for developing or underdeveloped countries. Policies must be designed and implemented according to the historical context and the local specificities. Another important theoretical point that I consider most important to understand the Global South development trajectory is that innovation is not a linear process and it results from internal and external source to the firm and from different interactions. In his 94 paper, The Economics of Technical Change, Freeman states that the advances in the innovation research have buried the linear models of innovation. This point is especially important for less developed countries where formal R&D activities are less frequent and often informal, and firms are generally smaller in size than in developed countries. And the last of the 3 points that I want to stress is that considering that innovation is a social process that and that it occurs in a territory, in different territories, the import or licensing of foreign technology does not substitute local efforts. The selection, purchase, copy, assimilation, and use of new technologies require knowledge and skills. This observation makes development strategies based on foreign technology use or import not feasible, as these technologies are developed for different realities from less developed countries. In Latin America, Freeman's broad concept of innovation system has been used together with the structuralist literature on development, considering their intersections and complementarities. Especially relevant to the use of the concept of innovation system in developing countries is the consideration of the implicit policies for productive and innovative development. Since the 70s, several studies on developing countries highlighted that implicit policies are often more important than the explicit policies of productive and innovative development. In this case, the definition of macroeconomic key variables, such as interest rates and exchange rates, among others, has to be compatible with the productive and innovative development strategy. Equally important is the existence of a national development project which promotes the coherence between implicit and explicit policy and establishes long-term strategies and priorities. According to the Freeman lecture of Professor Helena Lastres in the Global Leaks conference in 2016, the experience of Redicis on developing and using the concept of local productive and innovative systems in Brazil that results from the previous technology theoretical framework that I had just mentioned before, constitutes one clear example of Freeman's legacy to the improvement of innovation research and normative debate in the Global South. Therefore, Redicis research experience in the last 23 years proves that the core ideas of the broad innovation system approach can be applied to the understand of local development dynamics. The LIPS concept is a useful way of applying the innovation system framework in the Global South. The last point I want to raise in this talk is regards the thematic proposal of this part of the panel that is about the new horizons for the innovation system approach. The idea, some conclusions of one of our recent research projects in Brazil points to the importance of considering key global transformations for development dynamics. In special, I would like to suggest that the innovation system studies should try to address and to include the issues related to the impacts of the process of financialization on the innovation and productive dynamics. The process of financialization can be represented by the higher growth rate of investment in financial assets or financial flows as compared to the growth rate of global production and trade. Financialization is also associated with the wave of the regulation and liberalization and the reduction of nation-state space for policy actions. And it's important to remind in this panel that Freeman has already pointed to the importance of considering the potential impacts of the wave of financial deregulation, deregulation and liberalization that began in the end of last century. The intensification of financial liberalization and the consequent increase in the vulnerability of the financial system of almost all countries to shocks that could be spread through the system was one of the themes addressed by Freeman in his 2003 paper, A Hard Landing for the New Economy, Information and Technology in the United States National System of Innovation, in the book System of Innovation and Development that was edited by Carlota, Lastres, and Maciel. And it's an important departing point to discuss what are the main impacts of financialization for the innovation system approach. Financialization represents the process of subordination of the strategies of multinationals to the valorization of financial capital mediated by financial markets. As a result, large industrial transnational corporations have become financial centers with industrial activities. These companies begin to attribute less importance to production and innovation activities, increasing the importance of financial activities and value appropriation of intangible assets. According to our studies, this process, which involves the search for the valorization of companies' financial assets, causes a significant change in the production and innovation strategies of companies. They begin to try to minimize their costs and subordinate their long-term strategies to the maximization of short-term financial gains, with significant impacts in terms of reducing the innovatives of the world economy in the long run. Another important related issue that should be discussed by innovation system, in my opinion, is related to the impacts of the financialization process on the scope and space for industrial and innovation policies in different countries. We should try to address questions such as how to guarantee that the increase in the financial flows and financial investments do not reduce the necessary investment in innovation and the innovativeness of the world economy. What are the necessary changes in the innovation policies to deal with financialization strategies of multinational and to foster the development of national production and innovation capabilities in the global South? These are some of the issues that I'm in the final point. These are some of the issues that, in my opinion, deserve special attentions from academics and should be included in the reflections about new horizons for the innovation system approach. Thank you very much, and sorry if I took a longer time than I should.
No worries, Marina. You actually have a minute and a few seconds, so there you go. Not to be too troubled. Yeah, thanks so much for that presentation. You know, you also evoked a whole range of aspects which are so important to constantly remind ourselves. You know, and as I see, it's wonderful to see the sunlight come across, a new dawn in Brazil, and we hope it's more than just the weather. So, you know, the points around sovereignty that you've mentioned is so critical, and what informs the sovereignty? Is our sovereignty in terms of the subordinates that you mentioned? In other words, us being more pliant? Or is it us actually recognizing these contradictions that surround us and being able to specify those which harm us and desist from following such policy advices? So this links also maybe to an intellectual delinking. That's also important, not just the physical delinking around trade and systems, but also in the ways we think. Yeah. But we learn from history, as all our colleagues have constantly pointed out, and the context really matters, because for those of us that live in these contexts, these decisions are life or death. And I think we should not forget that. That gives us a good segue to Professor Keun Lee that's going to follow. And now, I hope you are still online, Keun Lee. I did see you a few minutes ago. Yes, excellent. So Keun Lee, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Let me try share my slide. Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
It's on.
So, given the our topic of session is that new horizon in a system, I'd like to introduce my new article, which is one example of exploring new methodology of measuring NIS and also applying to the issue of economic growth in Global South. Okay. So I'll be discussing we can measure or classify different types of NIS around the world, and thereby we can show there are several alternative pathways for growth beyond middle-income stages or middle-income trap. So I'll be showing that there will be two different successfully catching up NIS versus there is one trapped NIS. Okay, we can measure this by pattern citation data. So this is familiar graph of showing the idea of middle-income trap compared to the level of United States as a benchmark. There are some successful catching up by Korea and also some steady growth of Malaysia, but other countries are kind of stuck in the middle or remain the box between 20 to 40%. That's the one definition of middle-income trap by the World Bank. Okay. Then this is the same graph from same report by World Bank, showing that there are only certain economies which made progress from middle income to upper high income. These are the peripheral Europe plus Israel, Greece, Portugal, Spain, Ireland, Israel. This is from the 50-year window from 1960 to 2010. Okay. Then there is a Japan 4 Asian tigers, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. Then there is 2 oil exporters. So my task is how to explain these 13 to make the transition to the high income status, okay, by using the concept to NIS. So this is the graph of other countries who remain in the box, 20 to 40% range, many from Latin America, or including South Africa. Okay. So which type NIS to grow beyond middle income? And I'll show that big group is that there is a balanced group versus imbalanced group. Okay, I'll show what do I mean by that. Okay, so my definition of or measurement NIC based on Rumbal's Nelson's criteria that NIC is about elements which interact in production, diffusion, use of knowledge. So I'm trying to measure these ideas using pattern citation data. Okay. So these are the 5 main variables I characterize NIS: the localization of knowledges, dispersed versus concentration of innovation, short or long cycle technology specialization, originality means that degree of technical convergence, and technical diversification. Actually, I use these 5 variables to have a composite NIS index and show that that explains economic growth in my previous article. But I'm taking this same variable to do different analysis called cluster analysis, showing there are different clusters or different NIS groups. So these are the my data, many about 42 countries, and these 5 variables as mentioned. Okay, I use this variable to do cluster analysis, this kind of analysis, to group countries into several groups in terms of their mutual similarity or mutual disparity. So first, identify advanced country group. One group consisting of the mostly European countries, but there are 2 minor groups within this advanced group, first tier, second tier, but they are all balanced. Balanced means that these all 5 variables, their values are all equally high. In the sense, they are balanced. Then there is a balanced catching up group which include this Ireland, Spain, Hong Kong, Singapore from the 13 economies, plus India, Russia. So they are also they are the one who are making some catching up in terms of this World Bank criteria of a 13 group. Then there is an imbalanced catch-up group, which is China, South Korea, Taiwan. Then there is imbalanced and trapped group. So imbalance means that these 5 variables, their values are quite different each other. Some value very high, some value very little. So in this sense, they're imbalanced. Okay, so between these 2 imbalanced groups, one is rapidly catching up or growing very fast, the other is trapped. So the question, what makes these 2 imbalanced groups different? And one of the key variables is cycle time of technology, which I'll explain. So these are their dynamic evolution. I did this same analysis for the several different times to see their dynamic evolution. So in 1980s, the biggest group, everybody here, including Korea, Taiwan, or Singapore, all here. But from 1990s, Korea created their own group, joined by Taiwan and China. Then this another group created by Singapore, joined by Ireland, India, Malaysia, China. But eventually China went this group, then joined by Spain, Hong Kong, and Ireland. So you see these are one of the 4 countries which made balance and catching up. Okay, then these are the typical European first-year group with 2 subgroups recently, and Japan, US is outliers. Okay, so this is the what I call imbalance catching up group. These are the balanced catching up group. These are the end up to be imbalanced but trapped group, trapped in the middle income trap. Okay. So why do I call it balanced imbalance? These are the balanced groups radial diagram showing that all these 5 variables are equally high or equally middle ranges. That's first tier, second tier. The imbalance group, this is catching up group, Korea, Taiwan. They are very high in localization, high in diversification, but very short in cycle time. Trapped group, very long cycle orientation, but very little in localization and diversification. So these are quite different group natures, but the economic growth performance is quite different. This is very kind of trapped group. This is rapid catching up group. Okay, so these are the kind. Interestingly, these Singapore, Thailand, Spain, Hong Kong is one of the certain original group, but they are joined by India, Russia. So they mean India, Russia is can be regarded as promising in terms of their future growth prospect, and they might be join this catching up group with these four economies. Okay. So these are some more data. This shows the cycle time. Imbalance catching up very short cycle in normalized value below 1, 0.8. But imbalance trapped group very high values, like more than 1.17. Balance catch group in the middle, more balanced. Okay, but catching up group show very high localization and diversification, but trapped group very little localization and very little diversification. Then balance catch group in the middle. Okay. So I did some growth equation regression to confirm that these two imbalance catch group show a positive coefficient compared to benchmark group, which is advanced countries, but trapped group minus, so they are trapped. So some more data of India. India is balance catching up. That means they are filing patent a lot in not only in these chemicals or drugs, but also in telecommunication. So they are balanced in that sense. They are equally balanced in several sectors, which is quite different from Korea. Korea has only patent a lot in telecommunication or electricity and the electronics, right? So these are the data of cycle time normalized. So catching up group, imbalance catching very short cycle oriented, normalized value. And balance group is in the middle. And this is high income countries. But imbalance trade group is too strongly oriented to too long cycle technologies. Long cycle is not good because long cycle means high entry barriers. Short cycle makes sense for catching because short cycle means that high frequent innovation, which often disrupt incumbent knowledges. So that means low entry barriers, and high frequent innovation means high growth prospect. And these are the diversification. So imbalance catching group very rapidly filing patent many diverse field, and balance group in the middle, and no diversification in terms of imbalance trapped group. This is high income countries. And these are some more data for these 4 countries in the balance catching group: Spain, Hong Kong, Singapore, Ireland. They are all increasingly diversified in terms of technological portfolios. So they are also doing quite well in terms of these diversification indicators. And only localization, the high income, catching up by imbalance group, imbalance group, and some catching up by balance catching group, but no catching up in imbalance trapped group, no local building of local knowledge bases. So this is my final diagram showing that we see there are 2 paths of growth. One is balance path, the other imbalance path, which is similar to the Hirschman-Noxie debate. So this is our initial stage. We already go to become a balanced mature group like high-income countries, but there are 2 paths. One is the balance path, which is gone by Ireland, Spain, Hong Kong, Singapore, and possibly joined by India, Russia. But the other path is Far Eastern group, Korea, Taiwan, China, which is going into short cycle. So high-income countries are long cycle oriented, but if you target too early, then you will not make a success because long cycle means high entry barriers, not too easy make commercial success. That's why you have to go to short cycle orientation, where entry barrier is less, and high growth prospect. But that's not only way. You can choose more balanced group, which is more intermediate path. Not too long, not too short, but gradually catching up. Okay. So my summary is that we confirm some correspondence between diverse NIS type and catching up falling behind performances. We see there are variety NIS like variety capitalism, balanced NIS, which include mature versus catching up, also imbalanced NIS, which include catching up or trapped. Imbalanced catching up in NIS in East Asia is specializing into short cycle technology, thereby promoted localization and diversification. So getting short cycle means high localization because you rely less on incumbent knowledges, thereby you keep entering new sectors, thereby you become diversified. Okay. These catching economy all used to be in the same type as other middle-income countries, but they created their own path since 1990s. As I mentioned, first time by Korea, joined by Taiwan and China. Balanced catching NIS is alternative to East Asian path, which include also India, Russia. So I see these two countries also promising in terms of a future growth prospect. Okay, so they are not following China model, but they are following maybe Spain, Ireland, the other group. And possibly this other path, which I discussed, I did not discuss in this paper, is that Chile and Malaysia, they're already over 50% US level, which means getting out of middle income trap, but not by manufacturing, but by high value added export oriented resource sectors like vegetables or palm oil and rubber and so on. Okay, so that's discussed in my other paper with Petro Valley. So then basically I'm saying that there are several different pathways for growth beyond the middle income stages. You can pick up your own path depending upon your context. Okay? That's the message I like to deliver in our talk today. We already discussed the NIS concept is more broad and flexible to include diverse methodology and diverse ideas. In terms of methodology, I said that we can do not only quantitative, but also we can do both qualitative approach and quantitative approach, and we can also we don't have to put too much priority on manufacturing-based growth. We can use service sectors as a source of growth. We can also do resource-based sectors too. Whatever pickup, you can pick up your own growth promising sectors, not necessarily traditional manufacturing. Okay. And I think that that's what I can say. I have some longer version of papers which I sent around yesterday. Okay, thank you. Let me stop here. Okay.
Thank you very much, Keun. It's always an education listening to you and the presentation itself. I'm sure we've all learned a lot from it, and also gotten a sense of the diversity that we include in the Globelix community. A range of perspectives have been presented, and if you don't mind me, Keun, I'd like to get back to you very quickly in terms of what you also see as the research horizons in our field itself. You have mentioned particular issues about middle-income traps, and a lot of descriptive and analytical work that you've presented shows us how these are obtaining. As we recognize as they obtain, I'm sure you're very familiar as well. You must have seen the World Bank paper about what they entitled the impossibility of catch-up, especially after each global crisis. And the countries being set back never get the chance to come back and achieve the growth rates that they were achieving prior to the setbacks itself. So there's a constant dynamic in terms of the data, what's available to us. But a lot of that is premised on us having good data about what it is that we are doing. So as you describe in terms of what constitutes balanced or unbalanced systems of innovation, it's important for us to know how these actually obtain within our territorial context itself. And when we do that, as colleagues have been raising continuously, a whole range of factors that are not as clearly and clinically discernible as economic factors start to play an important role, including a balance of power in world systems itself. If we were all playing the game according to a set of rules that we all abided by, I'm sure by now, almost 13 million years in our evolution, we would have found a way to make the world better as well. So as we raise that point, the challenges still surround us. We are confronted by dire issues that need redress. A lot of this premised on an uneven distribution of capabilities, capacities, and competences across world systems. These points have continuously been re-emphasized, and I think it comes across how important it is that we draw this into the work that we ourselves are conducting. In other words, we cannot just follow formulaic practices expecting the same results. Our context determines who we are, and the better we describe it with a level of criticality that matches the contradictions and crises that confront us, the better it is for us to actually come with better policies that can address them. So thanks very much, Keun. Yeah? And as I've looked across even some of the questions that colleagues are raising, we've even spoken about this in different forms. And what comes across extremely strongly, and this is then the link back to also the legacy that we are following through on from Chris Freeman's pioneering work about trying to understand the phenomena and seeing how it obtains, the use of particular tools that are available to us, and the constraints upon our capacity to deploy them. Yeah. At the edge of the 21st century, colleagues, I want to remind everyone, it's not that long that we have a common era. Yeah. And earlier we had heard comments when colleagues mentioned in passing, we seem to have missed in the developing world, South, or even those components in the North, first, second, third industrial revolutions, and we asked to catch up with the fourth industrial. Colleagues, I want to encourage you, if we do our work as disciplined as Keun has shown, we did not miss out on first, second, third industrial revolutions. We have failed to see the benefits of those revolutions because it's the exploitation of our labor and our incorporation into world systems that allowed for those revolutions to prosper in the citadels that they did. Marina pointed out the question of financialization, and this plays an absolutely critical role in who determines not only what choices we have available, but our capacity to follow through on it. As we all know, the death wish confronting us is a so-called debt to GDP ratio. This is the way in which all countries of the global South are assessed and placed on ranked tables for investments. What COVID-19 has done to all our societies needs a reconciliation that involves a social engagement. And I really hope, as we've learned through the series as well, that we need to bring forward really high quality research to highlight exactly the challenges facing us. I think we all take as granted. We cannot understand this, and I'm sure people saw how amusing it looked when a tanker blocked the Suez Canal. And if you calculated on a daily basis how much the world economy was losing, we have to ask ourselves, are we not confronting and making blockages in pathways towards development that offer us a humane and even a chance of existing on the planet beyond the catastrophes we sometimes create? Yeah. So I raise these points also by way of trying to, I hope you didn't see it as me just filling some gap. We were looking for a colleague that was a colleague and a very important member of the community that was going, that had wanted to make some comments at this point, but we may have lost the colleague along the way. So I want to just check with Rajesh. Rajesh, did you manage to secure an additional input, or should we look towards pulling the discussion together? Rajesh? Yeah, so I think while we allow Rajesh maybe to get back to a mic as well, because I don't see him on the screen, I hope we also share. While we widely embraced using this platform and the technologies associated with it, even these technologies are not ubiquitous and they're not available to us all the time in the same quantities. Those of us in the Global South, as you know, have challenges about the costs associated. But as Lena correctly pointed out, also the possibilities that arise from it. Because we were not connected by copper wire, we were allowed to accelerate our pathways in mobile telephony, cellular phones. Yeah? And I hope similar sentiments then occupy us in terms of thinking through our future. Colleagues, a lot of this inspired by the critical insights of Chris Freeman, and also as the colleagues in the first sub-panel raised with us. Those insights were also premised on an appreciation of the Global South and the exclusion that the Global South has been confronted with, basically from World War II onwards. Yes? So we've seen this and we continue to see it. Various development models have been framed. A lot of this following formulaic parts, but their linearity in terms of the behavioral responses sometimes do not match the expectation. And here's another critical role. Our colleagues, we must be encouraged to follow through on the work that we are doing. People have raised a range of positive policy proposals that emanate from our community. Colleagues, we need to be aware sometimes those policies are adopted, but they are not implemented in terms of the wider framing of systems of innovation in evolutionary economic terms. In other words, what I'm raising is the serious challenge that confronts us, where we believe people have heard the message around innovation, but they are actually returning to neoclassical mechanisms through which equilibria, etc., are being predicted. So this capture of the language and some of the challenges that we raise is something that I want to encourage, especially as people keep raising this. I'm faced with the strange dilemma of no longer accepting myself as being young. I'm on the other side of the number divide, and soon I could even be quicker in line to get my COVID vaccination. But those are the realities that we all face. Lots of segmentation and segregations continue. Yeah, colleagues, I'm seeing some points being raised, and without Rajesh's intervention, I want to maybe suggest that we have a few minutes, that we utilize the time as well. We are all connected. There are 50 of us that are online at the moment. So I'd be willing, if any colleague wants to raise an issue, particularly now, if you could indicate so, and we'd take the comments, and then I will go back, Lena, Marina, and Keun to give us just a few minutes. It may not be a full 5, but just a few minutes to come back to some of the points that are raised, yeah? So if I can get an indication, does anyone, I see many people have posted written comments, but I can see if someone raises their hand on this facility. Please do. And colleagues, you all know that I do know most of you that are online, so I can start calling on you if hands don't go up as well. And I know you won't take offense. So.
There is an important comment by Andrew Robert about my talk and Marina's talk, whether yeah, they are complementary or contradictory, and these important issues.
Excellent. Yeah, good point, Keun. Andrew, do you want to come in? I see your hand as well. Excellent.
I mean, I just I was wondering what Keun thought about Marina's arguments and Marina on Keun. I'm trying to think how they could come together. One thing for Keun is, in these processes, how do the subnational territorial dynamics come into to play, thinking about Korea and thinking about where Marina says that subnational territorial context really matters as well as history. When you see Korea's development, do you see not just the main cities, but the outside areas are territorial, regional, local innovation systems coming into play? Is that part of this ability to quickly and from different places, innovate in short cycles? Is it does it have to do with territories, or is it just about the main city and that's the place that all of this came from, especially in relation to people's well-being?
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew. Keun, if you don't mind, can we just pick up if there are other questions, and then we'll come around and allow all the colleagues to respond, if that's all right. I think we can manage to come around in that way. I see, Leonardo, you had posed a question earlier on the chat room. Do you want to join us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rasigan.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering actually that into the theory, we focus technology such force to guide growth, right? But perhaps technology has another externalities, such as who has mentioned as the dark side of innovation. So perhaps if we focus on national systems of well-being, and we can consider a matrix of different policies, right? Just not to foster innovation, but to try to protect from the dark side, such as pollution, occupational health, which is diminished, toxicity perhaps from chemistry and other things. Perhaps we can have a more holistic view of the externalities of innovation. That's just an idea. I'm trying to put it into the table. Thank you very much, Rasigan.
Thanks, Leonardo. Thanks for raising that. Very critical issue. I picked up on it because it has shades of and reflections across a lot of the comments that we've picked up as well. So I want to check any others. If not, we are now at 20 past. I don't know which hour you are at, so that's why I'm just leaving it at 20 past the hour, whichever hour it is. Oh, excellent. Thanks, Veronica. I read the message as well. So, colleagues, if I could just go back then, and if it's all right, if we could, Keun, is it all right for us to start in reverse order? If I could start with you and then go to Marina and come to Lena at the end, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As a broad response from me to the all this discussion today, including those by Marina, I have to say, I'd like to mention the catch-up paradox, which is that you cannot catch up if you just keep catching up. That means if you just first the latter catch-up means just imitating. If you keep following the path of incumbent, you will never take over incumbent. You'll be already behind, as mentioned by the cartoon. If you believe you are below, you're already below. Okay, yes. So that means catching up effort start learning from others, learning from incumbent, but down the road you have to create your own path, or you have to explore different paths from your target. Otherwise, you already below your target. Okay, so that's what catch-up paradox means. You cannot catch up if you just keep catching up. Okay, okay. That means we have to explore new paths. We have to reflow. Okay, so in that sense, I'm side with Maria. In the sense, we have to explore new paths based on our own context, local context. It could be manufacturing, it could be IT services, it could be resource-based sectors, whatever you can do. Okay, yeah, that's my broad messages. And sub-national dimension, we have to extend our analysis to like RIS, regional system, not only national, because some country very big. So I'm doing the city-based same measurement as I did today. So I have around 50 cities around the world. I have the same measurement of 5 variables. I also do classify city into different grouping or clusters. I'm coming up with RIS of advanced country cities might be different from RIS of cities in emerging countries or global south. So I admit that we have to extend our analysis level to national, regional, sectoral, firm level, even people level, people's level. Okay, that's where we should go in terms of making our system literature more rich and more comprehensive.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Keun. Colleagues, as we shift to Marina, the robustness of the data that we use also, and that's where the veracity of the methodologies that we deploy becomes so important. Having strong evidence, as we had picked up from the earlier, is useful, but this evidence should be towards the ends that we actually seek. And as Keun rightly reminded us, if we set our view too low, the horizon is not going to rise. Yes. So Marina, a good segue back to you. Are there closing comments you'd want to pick up on and with the questions that were raised?
Yeah, thank you, Rasigan, and thank you for the comments and the questions. The first one is between the combination, complementarity or opposition between my points and Keun's own points. I think they can be complementary because the point is that we should, of course, we should learn from the developed country experiences. Of course, it's important to learn from what already have been successful in terms of developing strategies. But the point that I try to make is that it's impossible to think about, considering Freeman's ideas, Freeman's theoretical foundations, or the broad innovation system concept, each country should think about its own specificities, history, local conditions, and heterogeneities, and based on these specificities, we should try to find our ways. And I think Lee agrees with this point because when we have done a
Sorry, Marina.
You were not here. You didn't
Just
hear anything.
No, just the last bit, your last sentence.
Okay.
Just
Sorry.
one sentence.
Sorry. In our joint work, in our joint paper about global value chain, our departing point and also our conclusion was that to get well inserted in the global economy or in the global value chains, we should each country should the firms from developing countries should break the chains. So, and in order to build their own value chain. So I think the point I want to make is that it's important to design and to search for specific national developing paths. And when we say that there is not an innovation system model or an optimal innovation system to be followed, is that the point is that we have to build our own trajectory. It's impossible to think about developing our economies looking or copying other experiences. I think this is the point. The other point I want just to be, I will be very briefly, is that is about financialization. I think it's important to think how to incorporate this theme on the innovation system approach, because if there was a very small space for industrial innovation development, capabilities development in the global South, before this process grow like it's growing now, the financialization process. Now I think the space for industrial innovation policies are even smaller. They reduce it. So I think we should think how to, I think it's necessary to think about new instruments, new innovation policy instruments to deal with the new multinational strategies based on the maximization of the financial assets and etc. I think this is the point that I want to make, and I think it's important for us to start thinking about how to deal with this change or I think it's not a change in the strategies of the multinational firms, but I think we should think how to deal with this new panorama that we are facing now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Marina. Yeah, the panorama keeps changing, as we know as well. Yeah, and what we sometimes thought was successful may prove to be unsuccessful. We're even having to rethink. Earlier, we had heard a very positive comment about the Green Revolution. And now we are also seeing the consequences of that Green Revolution on the ecology. So I'm going to now turn to Lena for some wise words towards the end. I'd really like that we wrap this up post Lena's comments. Thanks very much, Lena.
Thank you. And I will do that by saying, thank you, Rasigan, for being an excellent moderator and for all your comments for all of us. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So thanks so much for that, Lena. Yeah, colleagues, I think we've come to the end. Thank you very much for your patience. We are exactly at the time at which we were meant to have ended, but we have halved our audience in the process. And I really want to encourage even the organizers to take note of this. This is a long stretch. A lot of us have participated in it. We've gained a lot, but we also need to learn from what we've experienced. And so maybe as we move forward in the series, we start making smaller sessions, but maybe more of them, recognizing we remain human. And as I reminded you, we don't have that self-expanding possibility to be capital ourselves, yes? But we can expand on capital and its advances. Useful stuff. So thanks very much, everyone. I hope you're all safe. Enjoy the break coming up, and we'll reconvene for the next seminar on the 8th. So see you all then. Take care, people. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.